everyone. Welcome to Friday night edition of Paranormal Roundtable. Josh Turner at PRTpodcast.com. That's the coordinates. You can see it up there. See it? And then right over here, right down there, that's patreon.com/PRTpodcast. That's how you can help the show. You can become a $10 tier, a $20 tier, $30 tier, and all those get you a swag bag. The 3 months and $10 will get you a swag bag. $20 first month, get you a swag bag. $30 get you a super swag bag. What's going on, guys? Something going on? Don't know what's happening here. We got a guest in the studio. I guess you guys just saw real quickly. Rick Atain. You want to say hi, Rick?
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Get,
he's trying to get used to this here.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, I'll give Rick his background here. Rick, I've known him for probably about 4 years. About 4 years?
Oh, give or take, yeah.
Yeah, I think we first interviewed you in 2019.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. And your wife is Bobby Atain, and you guys were part of the NADP.
Yes.
Which is, you're no longer a part of that. But you were at the conference last year, at our conference, and we've spoken at length multiple times. What you do, you want to explain to the audience what you do? Because they probably don't know what you do.
A little background. I'm retired law enforcement about 28 years. I worked in various different aspects of law enforcement, investigations, patrol, that type of thing. Retired in 2015. Pretty much my whole life, I've investigated the strange and unusual. I can remember growing up in a notoriously haunted house, and that kind of sparked my interest in the paranormal because of the activity I witnessed there and the experiences I had. And I went to young adulthood, started my career. And then I started getting into the, investigative aspect. I started looking into this type of thing, trying to figure out exactly what it was, if there was anything to it, because I still had a lot of strange things that happened to me that I questioned. Sometimes when you have a strange incident, you question, whether it actually happened or not. You kind of, in retrospect, you begin to look back at what happened, and you start to question if it was real or not. So I got into the investigative aspect of it, and I started with ufology. I became a member of the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, in '92, I think it was. I was a member of them for about 10 years. I became a state director for Virginia for 5 of those 10 years, and a lot of the cases we investigated. And a lot of UFO sightings we investigated involved areas that we refer to as flap areas. That's areas that have a lot of activity. And there are certain families within these areas that have a great deal of activity. Then you get into the abduction phenomena. And when you get into the abduction phenomena, then you go down the rabbit hole. You start having paranormal activity associated with the abduction phenomena. I thought that was rather interesting. And then, I left MUFON. I went with a paranormal group, a reputable group in my opinion, the Center for Paranormal Research and Investigations. They're based out of Virginia, and they're very data-oriented. They use the scientific method and all that type of thing.
His mic is a little low. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt Rick,
but
I had to. Okay, yeah, because they said he was too far or something. People are saying that. But
okay.
Do not question this man. He's in the studio for a reason.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But, I got into the MUFON thing. Then I joined the Center for Paranormal Research and Investigations because I was attracted to that organization because they're data-oriented, they're data-based, they use the scientific method. They use a lot of equipment, instrumentation, data loggers, and so forth. They try to get hard data on the paranormal. Mm-hmm. And I was attracted to them, so I joined them, and I've been with them since 2002 now. So about 21 years, and we've done a lot of cases and, paranormal, so forth and so on. Then I started getting to the demonic cases, or the negative entity cases, the negative haunting cases. And it corresponded with a lot of my experiences when I was a young kid. So I started getting into that aspect of it because of my prior interest, trying to explain this type of thing. Are these things real? What are their capabilities? What how do they operate, that type of thing. So I started studying. I'm a Roman Catholic. I've been a Roman Catholic all my life. So I started studying this subject in terms of the Roman Catholic belief system. And I started learning a lot of information and started, researching, priests, their lectures and so forth. Started reading a few books on Roman Catholic religious demonology and that type of thing. And I started incorporating that into my investigations and in order to help people. And, to my surprise, this stuff actually worked. I was actually able to help some people. And a lot of the activity that I witnessed and dealt with, it corresponded with what the Catholic belief system was. Mm-hmm. That, it seems like the Catholic Church right now is starting to open up their attic and bring down all that information and dust it off and make it available to the general public. And good for them, because a lot of exorcists like Chad Ripperger, Martins, all these guys are starting to bring that information out. And it's important because the information they're bringing out, it corresponds a great deal with activity that's happening. So, that's how I got involved in the negative entity type thing. So now I've transitioned to the cryptid area where we're investigating Dogman, Bigfoot, different types of cryptid activity, because I'm starting to see a paranormal link between the cryptid activity as well as the UFO and the paranormal. I mean, there's some type of link there. There's a common thread there that I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to figure out. So, and that's where I am now. 30-some years down the road, I'm now into cryptid research as well as paranormal research, and that's basically my story. And,
one of the things I was going to say about what you just said. Let me get my back. Back is hurting, folks. Bear with me. Don't get old, kids. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Just stay young forever. Be 25. Or be 30. You know what? They say 30. 30 is when you're at your peak physical strength, whatever. And so that's when you should turn 30.
Always stay 30.
Yeah, just stay 30. But no, all jokes aside, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church are really the main two that there's a lot of parallels, a lot of similarities. Right. And I believe that their approach to demons and demonology and angelology is very kind of appropriate, I guess.
It's in depth.
Yeah, very in depth, and they both do exorcism.
Yeah,
they both believe in the expelling of spirits through the prayer to God, for God to intercede to deal with these spirits, and then they also holy water.
Yeah,
there's really no other faith that has holy water.
Right.
It's just the Orthodox and the Catholics. Now, I have seen use in holy water in some like subsects that they'll do it. It's very rare, but I have seen people use like baptism water and things like that. But typically, it's Orthodox and Catholic.
Right.
And everybody, knows that Orthodox and Catholic aren't the same. Just ask Vlad Tepes. I think he went back and forth about 4 times. He was like, "Oh, am I going to get away with killing all these people? Then I'm Orthodox. Oh, okay. I'm in jail for being now. Okay, I killed all these people. Catholics are like, it's okay. Come on." And then he's like Catholic again. And I remember reading about him bouncing back and forth. And he
never mind how I killed them though.
Yeah, he got baptized about 800 times or whatever, and was like, "Oh, I'm sorry for what I did. Oh, I just killed another 1,000 people." But Muslims, he was fighting because in Wallachia, this is off topic, but just a history real quick. What I mean by that, Vlad Tepes is Dracula. And Tepes fought against the forces of Islam. And he was the gatekeeper, and he was instrumental. Actually, we may all be Islamic if it wasn't for him, because the Ottomans were a huge empire. Mm-hmm. And I actually taught Anthony a little bit of the difference between being called Anatolian. I told you that yesterday, wasn't it? Yeah. The guy was from Istanbul, and he was half Greek, half Turkish. He works in the mall. He's a friend of ours, and he was kind of explaining how weird it is to be, because at one time Greece was conquered by the Ottomans. Mm-hmm. And then I read the Greek War of Independence, which was like basically a religious struggle of orthodoxy overcoming Islam and driving them out. And it was so weird because civil wars are never clean, and you never really know who's who. And so you had the Albanians who were mixed. some were Greek Orthodox and some were Islamic, and they were fighting back and forth. And there's a lot of weird stuff that went on in that war. There were all these people who had fresh out of the war in Texas went to Greece to help them fight. People don't know that. There was a contingency of Texans that helped free them.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was like straight. It was like I think they went to Greece and then they came back here or back one or the other. I just read about it and I was like, that's interesting, because some of the ones that were there fighting ended up dying here. And so it was just, and I the reason I read about that, I heard about that, was because downtown there's a Albanian Greek family that's really kind of notorious, but they own a bunch of stuff downtown. And I used to work with them and some Lebanese people, and the Lebanese are Phoenicians, and what they essentially are is Greeks that took over that region of the Levant and interbred with the Phoenicians. They were Greeks basically, and they established colonies. Well, the Albanians were kind of like spun off from that. That's really what their origin is. And of course, if you ever go back and you want to read about Skanderbeg and all these, like he was the hero that freed them and whatever. But everybody had to eventually free themselves from the Ottomans, because the Ottomans had Asia Minor. They had control.
Right. They had great power back then.
They were very powerful. And so it was amazing what Vlad was able to do. But it was just funny because he was a flip-flopper. He was like, I'm Orthodox. And then next week he's Catholic. Then he's Orthodox. And he's Catholic. Whoever would get him out of jail, that's who.
I was going to say, that's probably what helped him survive.
Yeah, well, that and staking everybody would pretty much be, he killed more Ottomans other than the Cossacks, which would be my heritage. He was, the Ottoman killer. That's what he did. That was his job. The Cossacks were another group of people who flip-flopped. They were like Catholic, partly Catholic because of the boyars from Germany, and then they joined up with Ivan the Terrible, who said, the Sultan's telling me that you're killing him and he's appealing to me for help. Keep doing what you're doing, but become Orthodox. And then I can give you the blessing and I'll give you stuff to keep doing what you're doing. I'll keep pretending like I don't see it, which is essentially what happened. And the only time that Istanbul, after the Byzantine Empire, which is the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, the only time that the capital of Istanbul was ever taken was by the Cossacks, Black Sea pirates. They landed, and for 32 days they partied basically and destroyed the capital city, burned it, killed most of the Sultan's family, looted it, and just took everything. And and in their defense, they had been the whole region had been oppressed by the Ottomans for a long time, and so the Polish king and the Russian king said, "Hey, these monarchies said, if you can go and do something to these people, we'll make it worth your while." And they're like, we do it all the time anyway. That's just what we do. And how do you fight a people that can just disappear into the night? When the Europeans came here, they called the Comanches the Cossacks of the plains, because they did the same thing. They showed up, they sacked Austin one time, and then they just disappeared, and that was it. They would just destroy and kill and take and whatever and plunder. Anyways, that's your history lesson for today. So, Rick, let me get back to what you were saying about what you were talking about. Like you said, you lived here in Austin at one time.
Yeah, I lived in Austin when I was about 13, 14, 15, that age range. We'd moved. We were living in Virginia, and we moved down here because my father's Mexican. He wanted to be closer to Mexico and the culture and so forth. So he moved down here, and we moved with him. And after about a year or so, he couldn't find a good job, so he ended up moving back to Virginia, or we did. And but I lived in San Antonio and in Austin.
How'd you like it?
I loved it.
Yeah, Texas is a great. It's wonderful.
I loved it.
And people, they'll say, well, you're from Texas and you've always lived here. No, I haven't always lived. I've been all over the world, except for the Northeast. But who cares? Doesn't count. That's what it is. People live there. I don't know why, but I'm joking. All my Northeastern Nick Valenti is like, hey, no, but I haven't been up there. I haven't been up to the 14 different states up there. I haven't been to, or maybe it's 12. I don't know. I thought it was 14. But anyway, I haven't been up there, but I've been all over the world. And one of the things that I found very interesting when you and Bobby and we had that conversation when you were on the show, it's been, like I said, a few years now. I can't believe the show's already 4 years old. But you guys talked to me and Armando off air too.
Right.
And we had this conversation about you once lived in a haunted house.
Hmm.
But that wasn't here in Austin, right?
No, that was in Virginia, Southside Richmond. Yeah.
Wow. Do you want to get into that? You want to talk a little bit?
Yeah, I could do that. There was a house we lived in Southside Richmond. It was built, I guess, 1908. We had minor activity, sporadic activity, noises, walking, somebody walking up and down steps, floors, or whatever, something minor like that until my brother started dabbling in the occult. And he started getting into some really, really, really dark stuff. And he used to do this in what we refer to as the back room. And
Is your older brother?
it's it's my second oldest. And that I don't want to get into it because it brings back bad memories. That particular room, it was what was in there was nasty, very, very, very nasty. And anyway, it affected me. I had to get, eventually the church helped me out. But, I have an idea of what these things are. And that's why I got interested, because I wanted to know what they are, where they came from, their capabilities, their weaknesses, that type of thing. And that's when I got studying, Roman Catholic demonology. I started to understand a lot more, and I was able to understand why they did certain things and why certain things happened to me and how certain things transpired. And that's the way I am today. But we had a lot of activity in that particular house. At one point, I'll give you a short example. At one point, something attacked me emotionally. It got to the point where I was stiff as a board, and I had red splotches pop out on my face, and I was under attack. And I don't remember much about that. It was a rage I was in, and whatever it was. And when I found out that these things can affect your emotions, in that respect, that brought a lot of it to the surface, and I was able to understand a little bit better. But thank goodness for the church, I was able to get rid of it. And
did you have to go to the church to do that?
Well, what I did was I didn't know if it had affected me so much. And then years later, I was baptized Catholic, but I never had my confirmation, never had First Communion or anything like that. So when I went through my confirmation process, the RCIA program, there's a special blessing they give their catechumens. These are people that are coming into the church, and they have certain rites and rituals that they have to go through. Well, there's a certain rite that I went through that it cleans you out, spiritually.
Yeah.
And I can remember standing there, and during the ritual, it's like I'm looking at my life. It's like a book. You take a book and open the book, and you flip through the pages, and you see pictures, and those pictures came back, and they just flip. I mean, just in a matter of seconds, and all of a sudden, I was clear. And that was a great feeling. I didn't realize that it affected me to that extent, and I was much better for it than I was before. So
I actually was baptized as a Catholic when I was a baby.
right,
And my dad wasn't religious, and he wasn't raised religious. My grandfather, I don't think my grandfather believed in God, but he used to say that God didn't like him. My grandfather was an outlaw. My grandfather had me helping him steal sheep and goats and cows when I was like a kid.
yeah,
And he would pretend like it was a game, and like I went along with it.
right,
I was a kid, but I knew what we were doing. And finally, I said, "Papa, you're stealing this man." He said, "No, we're not. We're borrowing these goats, and we're taking them over here to Big Springs to sell them to another man. We're doing him a favor." And finally, when I got older, I was like 14 or something. He was still trying to hustle me and lie. At that point, he'd already lost his leg, and I said, "Man, you're full of crap, dude. You had me stealing." Literally, I was thinking about writing a book about my childhood and about running around with this man out in the canyons and stuff and living like an outlaw.
yeah,
Like we found this abandoned truck one time down by the Rio Grande, and we went out there and we just took like 3 guns and all day long, just shot it full of holes.
right,
And my grandfather wasn't a big drinker, but he let me drink with him that day, and I was like 11. and I was like shooting pistols and shotguns and just, well, it turned out that truck actually belonged to somebody. Yeah. And my grandfather like just sat there and lied right to the guy. Yes, we got here and we ran these bandits off and they took off across the river.
Turned you into a wild child.
Yeah, he's like, they sure did tear your truck up. And I was like, wow, Papa, you just lied to that guy. He's like, well, it's better than telling the truth and then having to shoot him. And I'm like, good grief, man.
I know.
But he was that kind of guy. So my dad grew up like wild, no religion, nothing. So he allowed my mother just, oh, well, you want to be Catholic? Fine. Sprinkle water on the kid's head, whatever. And then when I was about 5 or 6, I guess, we started going to a Baptist church, and my parents got real serious about it. And I'll never forget, I watched my mom and my dad go up to the pew at the front and bow down, and I was like, what are they doing? And my sister said they're being saved. I was 5 at that time. And I was like, what does that mean? And my older sister, of course, not your mom, Anthony, but the other one, she was like, it means you're going to go to hell because you're not saved. And I was like, are you saved? Yes, we're saved, but you're not. You're the only one. You're the baby. And, hopefully you don't die before you get saved because you go to hell. She told me that. So I go home and I'm like, for days, I'm waking up with dreams of being in what I thought was hell.
Right.
But my little kid version, my mind of hell was really weird. It was like there was this guy in a red suit reading books, and I was like, I didn't like him, and I was burning. And like if he stopped reading, I stopped listening, then it would make me hot. And I woke up sweating every day, and my mom was like, it's like Mijo has a fever. So she asked me, she says, what's wrong? I said, Mom, I don't want to go to hell. And she's like, Mijo, why are you're 5 years old. I said, I want to be saved. And so going into my 6th birthday, the preacher, Pastor Blair, I'll never forget, he came to me and he says, you have to be of the age of understanding to be baptized and to be saved. Do you know what this means? I said, well, it means that I don't have to be in hell and the devil reads me books. And he goes, he kind of shakes his, he's like, what are you talking about? I said, it's a dream I had.
It's kid perception, like, right?
Yeah. And he goes, okay, well, let me explain to you. So he put me in Sunday school and they focused on our age group trying to teach us about what it was to be saved and what salvation was. And so then I got saved and I was baptized. And after I came up out of the water as a child, I felt like a new person. And then I, ended up, we moved to Central Texas, and my parents ended up going to a non-denominational church, which I wasn't as comfortable at. And when I was 12, I was 11, I got rebaptized.
Right.
So I was baptized 3 times, dude, like 3 times. Like, how many times do you have to be baptized? So,
yeah, I admire a lot of the Protestant denominations because they're very passionate about their belief system, very passionate about their beliefs. And, I wish that could hit some Catholics. But, I admire a lot of them because of their passion for it and their love of Christ.
The problem is, though, they don't agree on the time of day.
Yeah, well, you've got 40,000 different Protestant denominations, and they all differ.
All different.
And they're fighting, for example, it's like Bill might go to Pastor Bill, Williams' sermon. If he doesn't agree with his interpretation of Scripture, he starts his own church, or he starts his own church. But and the reason the Catholics baptize, a lot of people don't know this, but the reason the Catholics baptize their children as infants is because in the Catholic baptism there is a minor rite of exorcism, and what they found that a lot of the children in the womb, some become possessed and have attachments depending on what the mother did, or
familial curses,
some familial curses, or generational curses, that type of thing. So that's one of the reasons why they baptize infants. Is because
break those.
Because there was one exorcist that said that he had one child that was so possessed, he called it the Chucky doll, because every time he tried to pick it up, it would try to rake his eyes out. And I guess they cleaned that up. But that's the reason the Catholics, they baptize their kids as infants, because you can have attachments in the womb and possession in the womb depending on what happened. The parents don't realize the parents have spiritual authority over their children, and that spiritual authority carries down. It has a great deal of oomph. So that's why they do it as infants, because the Catholic baptism has a minor rite of exorcism in it, and that clears it right out right then and there. And as they go on, after they reach the age of reason and so forth, they can continue into the Catholic faith by, First Communion and then, confirmation and that type of thing. But that's the reason they baptize them so young.
Yeah. One of the things I was going to talk about now, folks, just to clarify, I personally am not Catholic. Okay. But I don't disavow anybody else's religion or what they believe. I'm not even a non-denominational because, truth be told, non-denominational became a denomination.
Right.
And I'm not a Pentecost. I've gone to the Pentecost church, and I've actually been to Islam, and I've been to Buddhist temples. I'm respectful. I don't adhere to all of their beliefs, but that's not to say that I'm disrespectful to them. I had a long conversation with a Hindu the other day. She was she works at one of the restaurants we go to, and she was very nice. They were having a wedding, and it's very eye-opening when you talk to these people what you can agree on.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I taught the boys here was, you have to find common ground with whoever you're with, whoever you're around. Now, I was locked up as a kid a few times.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
Yeah. And I got in some trouble, and, trying to find common ground with some of these sociopaths.
Oh.
And you're like, oh, really? You stabbed that dog that many times? Wow. I wouldn't have done it quite as much. And they're like, have you done anything like that? I'm like,
and you wouldn't have enjoyed it either, would you?
I'm just like, yeah, dude, of course. Every time I see one, I'm like, come on, man. I'm pulling out the knife, and you're walking away going like, what the heck is wrong? No one of these people are here. I remember going up to one of the techs. There was guards and there were techs. And I told the tech, I said, am I in the right place? Because what I did is nothing like these people are all violent. And what I was in there for was a minor assault. I pushed a kid off a bike, but I was already in trouble before, And so I was like, this guy just admitted to me that he killed his mom's dog. It was like some crazy stuff. But I think, and I'm talking about this because I think in one of those reformatories I was at, the first time I came across like what I believe to be demonic possession happened in one of those facilities. And it was a kid that was my bunkmate. Now, I was in multiple facilities, but one of them that I was in, we had a pretty big room. I would say probably, like it was, I don't know how big is like your bedroom, Anthony, I would say. It probably looks about the size of your bedroom.
Probably about 13 by 12.
A little bigger than that, probably 15 by 12 or something like that. And we had these beds on one side and he was on the other. And this kid, I'll never forget, he was from Chicago, and he would babble in his sleep. Okay. And his parents were Polish. Now, and I lived in Chicago for like a little while, for like a few months, because my mom sent me up there. She's like, you'll do better up there. You'll quit getting in trouble. Go to Southside Chicago. And then I'm just getting my butt kicked by the Italians, the blacks, the Polish, the Cubans, the Dominicans, every group of people. They're like, why are you in this neighborhood? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm from Texas. You don't know. You're from Texas. And then they'd beat me up, And then I'd go into another neighborhood and get beat up. So I was trying to go. I ended up going to a boxing gym there. Windy City Boxing Gym was a very famous place. And I ended up learning some skills. And then they sent me back, and I had already been boxing in Metropolis. I could fight. That was the only thing I could do. I could fight, but I couldn't beat up 5 or 6 Polish guys, But I knew what Polish sounded like. And this guy, he was talking in his sleep, and he was speaking in Polish. So one day, his name was Matt. So one day he wakes up, and he was having a nightmare, like a night terror. And when I started, I get chills when I think about this. I started shaking him, and his eyes were rolled back in his head. He was doing this. He was like, and I was like, whoa. Like, what is this? There's a bunch of psychopaths in this place, right?
Right.
They eventually moved me from that unit to there was like one called Spring Hill, and then there was another one, Spring Hill 2. I got moved from that bad one to like a lesser offense one because I petitioned. I was like, dude, why am I in here with all these people that are always fighting? They're always doing crazy stuff, and there's always a code, like a code red, where they have to come and jump on one of the kids and make them behave and all that. And I'm like, why am I in here with these people? So they moved me, and they give you like a therapist you can talk to if you request it. And she petitioned them to move me, so they did. But this kid, he was freaking out, right? So he wakes up the next day, like I just laid there, like just not sleeping. It was like 3 or 4 in the morning, and like we got up at 6, right? And we had to go to school, go to class, even if you were, whatever. And so I was sitting there, and the next day he gets up like nothing happened, and he gets ready to go take a shower. And so I said, hey, Matt, can I talk to you for a minute? I said, what? You're talking and you're sleeping and you do it a lot. And he goes, really? I said, what was I saying? I said, you were speaking what sounded like Polish because I knew it from Chicago because the summer before. I said, look, I don't know what your heritage or whatever. And he's like, I'm Polish. I was like, okay. And his last name was like Wojciechowski, Wojciechowski, I can't remember how to pronounce it. Waleski, something.
Something with too many letters in it.
Yeah, I mean, he had to be Ukrainian, Russian, or Polish, but the I think, is dead giveaway. He's Polish, but I didn't know that at the time. I was a 16-year-old kid. And so I said, Matt, you're talking in your sleep. You're doing all kinds of weird stuff. He got up and he would pee with his eyes closed. I watched him. He'd get up and he would pee into the air conditioning thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the people come in there and they're like, why does y'all's room smell like pee? And I'm like, this dude's peeing in the dill. And then he was not a liar. Like he told them, he goes, I sleepwalk. So then I'm like, okay, so I'm locked in this room for 8 hours a night with a sleepwalking crazy person who's spewing Polish. Then it got worse. Okay. One night I was there and I heard like that. It sounded like guttural, not his voice, which normally was like his voice. And then I heard what I thought was a female voice, like saying, talking like that. And I couldn't understand a lick of it. And I got up and I'm over there like knocking on the door and I'm like, hey, this guy is possessed. I'm telling you. And I look over, I didn't see him like levitating or any weird stuff like that. But when the guards came in, there was one guy named Donnell. He was an African-American guy. He's real cool. He comes in, he goes, what's up, man? And he called me Wolf. I told him about what happened to me, and he was like, oh my God, what's wrong with this dude? So he grabbed me by the arm and we left the room because I don't know what he saw. I didn't turn around and see it. I got out of the room, but I heard him talking to the night nurse that was there. She was, you need to go check on this dude. This dude's like rolling around. It's weird looking.
Yeah.
And she went in there and he choked her. Now I didn't see it and I wasn't there inside the room. I was just sitting there, with like one of the guards talking to me. Are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine, whatever. This kid was a tall, skinny kid. I could beat him up any day of the week. But this guy's, something's wrong with this guy,
Mm-hmm.
So they came to me and they said, well, we're going to move you into another room. So they moved me into another room with this other kid. And that kid was like, we were both talking about it because he had to get woken up at me in the middle of the night. So they let us sleep for an extra hour. And that kid was like, dude, I knew something was wrong with that dude. This kid was like from Oklahoma. He goes, he's nuts, man.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, one day he was like supposedly having a seizure because he has seizures.
Right.
He's like, but then his tongue came out and was like hanging down past his chin and he was talking.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, he goes, I'm not no expert, as a 17-year-old kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, but I don't think that's having a seizure. He's like, don't you bite your tongue or something? And I started thinking about it and I was like, dude, something was really wrong with that kid.
Right.
Well, come to find out, like I got out of there and I ended up becoming friends with a couple of the techs and guards. And so I ran a nightclub downtown on 6th Street. And one of them, this guy named Shelby, I haven't seen him in years. And if you're listening, hey, what's up, man? He went to Southwest Texas State. He was a student. He gave me the 411 on that kid. Like years later, we hooked up like in 97, 98. And I saw him walking by and I reached out and he had a leather jacket. I'll never forget. I said, hey. And he looked at me for a minute and he was like, oh, man. He was an African-American guy too. And he's like, Josh Wolf. I said, yeah. And he goes, well, what's up, dude? So he came in the club with his girlfriend. And so after a couple beers, I gave him some free drinks, whatever. And I was sitting there talking to him. And I said, dude, do you remember that kid, Matt? Like, he goes, oh, man. He goes, the dude that was possessed. Everybody remembered that guy. And I hate to talk about him because I don't know where his life went or what I haven't seen him since 1991, whatever.
Right.
92, I guess. And so he tells me, he goes, dude, that guy had suffered like severe abuse when he was young. He had like a stepdad that was abusing him in every which way. And when he came in, like I saw scars on his arms. I didn't know what that was, but I guess his stepdad had abused him pretty heavily. And so it created some sort of psychosis. But I was wondering if, in your opinion, what happened to this kid? Do you think that psychologically, like it opened up a doorway for him to be possessed? Is that what I was witnessing, or what was it?
It's possible. A lot of these entities can mimic common mental illnesses, and they can also work in concert with a legitimate mental illness. But abuse like that from a father or adult figure like that, especially a parent or grandparent or somebody who has spiritual authority over you, that can open doors. I can't say for certain if it was a spiritual aspect to this kid's problem, but that can open doors. It's very commonplace with people that I've seen that have these issues where primarily women, they've been physically, sexually abused either by their husband, father, or another family member, adult family member. And that can be an open door to some of this stuff. They like brokenness. These things like to attack people who are broken, and they just seep in there. I'm sorry.
They attack people with trauma.
With trauma, physical, emotional trauma, primarily emotional trauma, which is if it's a sexual abuse case, there's a lot of emotional trauma there, and there's a lot of brokenness, there's a lot of mistrust. These things will seep into that big crack and find residence, and then wreak havoc for the rest of that person's life until they get help. But not saying that everybody who's had some type of physical or sexual or emotional abuse is possessed or has an attachment. It's just that's a common trait with a lot of people who are either possessed, have an attachment, or extraordinarily affected demonically. Oppression, obsession. Oppression's a big problem in that area. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a distinct possibility, but I can't say for sure right now.
Everybody that's donated so far, Jordan Cogburn, Barry, Larry Fisher, Lunar Eclipse, and there were a few that we missed that were, let me go back up and tell these people thank you real quick. Hold on 1 second, Rick. We weren't trying to be rude. I guess I can't go back up any further, but we missed a few people. Thank you. If you donated, we appreciate it. Donations aren't expected, but they are appreciated, and it helps the show function. It keeps us going. So thank you to everyone who's donated. Ken Christian, thank you so much. What's really weird about that whole situation was I stayed in touch with 3 different guys from that facility, that particular one. We made friends because I was there for a while in that one. And Anthony, one, Clay. He's one of my really good friends, and he panned out. We ended up, there's this one guy I ended up locked up with in 3 different places. One was a treatment center where, they told me, well, if you behave, we'll put you there. And you can get some help because at that time I had been drinking, mm-hmm. but I wasn't really into drugs or drinking. I was just that time I got in trouble for drinking because I was in trouble for all kinds of things. And they said, well, he's got a drinking problem. Let's put him in the facility. So I was glad. I was like playing it up like, yeah, I like to drink all the time. That's what I do, man. And the judge is like, okay, well, we'll put you in treatment, which in reality, that was just like that first time I'd ever done that in my life, like gotten actually drunk other than when I was with my grandpa. And some people might say, my mom used to say, my grandpa did that. He ruined me, whatever. I was already messed up kid, whatever. I was wild, So they put me in a treatment center, and that's when I first met Clay. But then we ended up locked up in juvie together. And then we ended up in that reformatory together. And of course, after you get to a certain age, they seal your records, and then you can't unless you do something really violent. And the judge was like, okay, and you've served your time, whatever. And I never got in trouble again. Mm-hmm. Never, other than the ticket. And then I got really close fighting in public, and then they let me go. But it was because the police were right there, and they saw the guy hit me first. Yeah. And then I started, fighting, and then the cops said, hey, enough. And that oddly enough, that was on a Halloween night, and it ended up on the news. Oh, so I don't know what year that was, but if Starscream's listening, he could probably tell. You met him probably at the conference. He was the door guy. Okay. Yeah, Scream was there that night. That was like his first or second night, and we ended up on the news. And my mom was like, remember she told you about that? My mom, she's like, I saw you on the news, mijo. And I was like thinking something, oh, really? Did they show the club? She goes, yeah, you were fighting with two. But I was so embarrassed. I was like, I'm sorry, Mom. She's like, is that what you do down there? You just beat people up? I was like, Mom, in my defense, they were trying to rush the door, and the police backed us up. It wasn't like they grabbed those guys and pulled them away from the door because they attacked one of my guys who was Starscream. But yeah, it wasn't like it was something I just went there to do. But it's real easy to fall down that slippery slope of like, it's a sin mm-hmm. to commit violence, right? And I do believe that there are
It can be.
Yeah, it can be. If you're defending yourself, that's one thing. But I did go down that road of like enjoying it.
Right.
And so I do believe that there's a spirit of that attaches itself to you, whatever vice it is that you do or that you have. And that demonic presence, you can feel it.
Yeah.
There were times when I get into a fight and I'd feel this electrical energy, like I would just feel it coursing through me.
Kind of like an unnatural rage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and it can like take over you and become like you become that, and it's almost like you become one with it, and it is a weapon, but you're a weapon too. And I liken it, and it sounds silly, but like to the Force. You know, if you're tapping into that negative energy, you ride that quick energy. It's what it is.
Yeah.
But it's not something for long-term use because, and I'm going to say this, somebody pointed this out to me, you know, the character of Palpatine, the Emperor from Star Wars, he looks all hideous and he's like, you know, and everybody's like, he's so gross and ugly and old. Using the dark side literally makes you that way. Now, I had a boss who used to work with me. I'm not going to say his name, but he worked with me at the bar that I worked at. And for about 2 or 3 years, I worked with him. And one night when there were multiple times when he was around, there was like paranormal phenomena that would happen because that club was haunted. It was a very large building, but I would go in there sometimes, do liquor order, do whatever. Never felt anything. Then he'd show up and we'd start hearing noises, weird stuff. So one day I was talking to Loki, actually, who's one of my friends, has been on the show. And Loki's like, I don't think this building's haunted. I think he is. Like he made that kind of like a joke, right? And then my brother chimed in and he said, dude, we were at other bars and weird stuff after hours would happen around him. So then he had a roommate. And that guy told me, he says, dude, he practices black magic. And what he does is he messes with water. Like he would do this like looking into water and stuff. And
kind of mirror magic or
like
something.
Divining or whatever it's called. Yeah.
Divination.
Divination. And he could see things. Like he would find, my house was haunted. It had a lot of weird stuff happen. And he started telling me that he saw one of the demons that was in my house. And I had how did he see that? Unless he astral projected or he saw something.
Scrying.
Huh? Scrying?
Someone put on there scrying.
Scrying, yeah. And so he actually started to describe something that had happened to us.
Yeah.
And I went around the horn and I asked everybody, I said, who has talked to him about this? Because at that point I hadn't told this guy anything. And he said, well, you know, nobody's told me anything, whatever. He goes, I saw it because I'm psychic, he said. And his roommate said, psychic my butt. And he practices.
That's the thing. Some of these things, in order to garner interest and curiosity, they'll make you think you're psychic. And these entities are performing these acts, but they're making you think you're special. You're special.
Yeah.
You're a special person. And, you know, this is what you can do. And you should keep doing it, you know, because you're talented and you could use your talents. That's one of the ways they kind of seep in there. And, you know, it becomes a relationship at that point, but then becomes an abusive relationship after a period of time. And then it's kind of hard to get rid of. So,
I mean, by the time he was 40, Rick, he looked 60.
Right.
I mean, like he aged so bad. Like his hair is like completely white now. Like I haven't seen him in a couple of years, but a couple of years ago when I saw him at our Ashes, he looks terrible. I don't know what he did, you know.
After a while, your body, you know, starts to manifest, you know, unknowingly. You start, you know, you could tell, you know, somebody, you know, I was telling you about a particular case before where I was involved with this one woman on a Dogman case. And she, you know, when I looked at her, you know, she appeared okay. She was somewhat attractive. But then, you know, she didn't want any pictures taken of her. She didn't want any, you know, she didn't want us to know her name. She just wanted to relay her Dogman encounter. And she took us to this remote area in South Carolina and said, do you want to see a Bigfoot? As if I'll conjure one up for you. Well, you know, my antenna went up and something inside said, tell her no. So I said no, and she was kind of disappointed. Long story short, you know, one of my investigators took a photograph of her without her knowing it. And when he showed me the photograph, you know, I knew he'd taken a photograph of her, but I never really viewed it until maybe a year later. When he showed me a copy of that photograph, that wasn't the same girl I saw. It was something, she was completely different, as if this person had some type of, veneer, put up this image of her that she wanted you to see, not the actual image of her, that she,
You're saying like something masqueraded as her?
not masquerading as her, but
She was, yeah.
Do you think like, oh, so she put up something that kind of...
The person I saw was very attractive. And then the picture of her later, she wasn't attractive at all. It was as if she was able to force an image onto your intellect or onto your mind's eye as to what she wants you to think she looks like. It's like it's kind of hard to explain.
Yeah, no, I think I understand what you're saying.
Long story short, when I looked at the photograph, that wasn't the same person I was talking to, at least in appearance.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, who was she and what was she doing, and what was her goal? And I law enforcement, I kind of studied her. After a career in law enforcement, I looked at her a great deal, and I noticed that she had the grunge look to her, and she had taken all her earrings out, all her piercings out, and I'm thinking, why would she take all her earrings out, all her piercings, all her necklaces off, unless they might have gave us some idea as to what she might have been into.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just, my hair goes up, the hair goes up on my arm when I think about it. So I meet a lot of strange people, believe it or not.
Well, you're sitting here with a strange person.
Well, I'm strange anyway, but, it's an interesting field to get involved with because, you're looking into the abyss and the abyss is looking back at you. And, after a period of time, you begin to realize that something's looking back at you, and it's not always very good.
And you've mentioned, like, when we've talked off air about compartmentalization, but you called it what was it again? The word you used of all the different types of paranormal.
There's a common thread to from what I can my experience. There's a common thread between ufology, the paranormal, and the cryptid phenomenon. They all have paranormal aspects that kind of thread together. A UFO abduction case has paranormal aspects. Dogman aspect. Cryptids in general have a paranormal aspect to them. Like, for example, somebody might be driving down the road and might be a Dogman or a Bigfoot or some other type of cryptid across the road in front of them. All of a sudden, the car stops. The electrical system cuts off. And that's predominant in poltergeist type cases where they interfere with electrical systems and, electronics in general. So that's just one aspect of the paranormal that encompasses all three fields for some reason. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but I think it's interesting. That's fascinating. That's why I'm looking at all of it right now. So
And I'll tell you this, Rick. In 2006, I worked, and you guys know the guy that's helping us with our house. We call him Snake Man. Simple reason. He was on a show called Rattlesnake Republic for a couple seasons on Animal Planet. He holds the Guinness Book of World Records for the most. He laid in a glass coffin. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He laid in a glass coffin with rattlesnakes. And his name is Robert Ackerman. You can look him up. Very interesting guy. And he works for a large construction, or used to. And he was our biggest client for a few years. And I started working with him in 2006. And if I remember correctly, he was our umpire when I was in Little League. And I used to argue with him. He said that years later, like, he saw me and he's like, "What's up, man?" And and I was like, "Oh man," because I went to school with his sons, Daryl and his Robert Jr. Very interesting guy. But he had some issues going on at that complex down off of Slaughter Lane. And he said, "Now, how Robert talks, he says, I got some weird things happening over here. These guys, they want to leave before dark, and whatever. And it ain't getting dark till 8:30, it's summertime." He says, and so I don't know what's going on, but I think they may be trying to take things. Stuff was missing and what was happening. It was really bizarre, and we still can't explain it to this day. We started positioning me up at the back gate. We closed off the front.
Mm-hmm.
The place was originally called Waterstone. I probably shouldn't say that, but it's not what it's called now, but it's what it was called then. And it was a very, very haunted place. And I mean haunted as in there was some demonic activity there, not just haunted stuff. It was something. And that's what was happening, was my batteries were being drained. My watch would go dead. I've always worn watches. My watch would go dead. I had a Game Boy Advance. It was constantly dead. I'd try listening to the radio, and I'd get static. And truck battery. I went through an Interstate battery. My old mechanic Blaine, who was a master mechanic. I mean, he put a brand new Interstate battery in there, and it was shot within 2 days. And he's like, I've never seen this in 20-something years of being a mechanic. He goes, I don't know what the heck this is. And you know how good of a mechanic he was, Anthony. He was a master mechanic. And so he's like, I've never seen anything like this. And he goes, I've never seen an Interstate battery have to be taken back. He goes, I guess it does happen. It's never happened to me.
Right.
2 days is pretty wild. I mean,
Yeah, that was crazy. And at that time, I was friends with your stepdad, and he came out there, your stepdad, and a few other people, and said him and Bones and Pete and all them, R. Ash, Tony, they came out there, and not you, Tony, but the other Tony, and they all had weird things happen. You could take a picture of the darkness, dude, and I wish I still had this email account because I had pictures of orbs, and I had like a pillar, like a blue pillar that I saw go between these buildings, and I was with Snake Man's son, Daryl, and I said, look at that, dude. I took a picture of it, and I had it on my phone. Of course, the phones back then weren't worth crap,
Right.
but I took a picture of a ball and a green orb. And Anthony, I know you saw this before my account got taken down. It had two demonic looking faces right there. I'll never forget. It appeared that was, I didn't see them when I took the picture of this basketball sized green orb.
Right.
So the guys that were working there, the Mexican nationals, predominantly what they were experiencing phenomena there. And I watched this. This is with my own eyes. Like I saw them lay like 30, a stack of 30 of these pieces of sheetrock. Okay. I left that morning on Saturday morning. The other guard came in. It was 24/7 or whatever. This guy Brandon, who's just whatever. I want to talk about him. He came in, but he was right there, and he said, "Dude." When he came in, I told him, I said, they just dropped some material right here. We got some drywall right here. And we got some wood over here, blah, blah, blah. I'm not crazy, okay? I come back, and he was on the other side of the property, and I was like, the drywall was where the wood was, and vice versa.
They switched?
Yeah. And so when he comes back up to the front, I told him, I said, okay, we did paper report back then. I walked over to the trailer. I pulled the report out. And I looked at it and I said, dude, and then I looked at my phone. I took a picture of where these things were. And I said, does this look weird to you? And he turns around and he goes, oh my gosh. Like he freaks out. This guy was already very high strung and superstitious anyway. He goes, I can't work here. I can't work here. He's like, that was right over there just an hour ago. I went to the front, and now it's over here. And he's like, dude, and then he had some weird stuff that was happening. And I think it was, like I said, I think he had problems already, and he was just like, I can't work in a place like this.
Is this the same place where I remember you used to have this picture that you took of yourself when you were sitting in the truck? I think you were working one time, and you just took a picture of yourself, but in the background you can see like faces or something.
Yeah,
like in the darkness.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah,
that was the place.
Yeah, that place. I'm telling you, dude. Like I took this is what happened. It was Bones's. Because we worked out at Sally's the next year. That's when I started my business. The next year we started working together, and Bones told Philip. Do you remember Philip? Do y'all remember him? Okay, and he's the one that saw the golem-looking creature out there by the lake. He goes, show him the pictures we got. We're working off of slaughter. And so I said, okay. So I pulled out my phone and I showed him one. I took the girl that Bone was talking to. She's like, there is something. I was on the phone with him, and she came up. I guess she was psychic or whatever, but she came up and she said, there's something behind you. Take a photo right now. And I did. And dude, the blood just drained out of my head. I thought, look at this crap. What is this? Weird. You could see it.
Yeah.
You remember that,
yeah,
right?
I saw that picture.
Okay, yeah. So there was like this weird, there was stuff out there. And one day Bones took a picture of just the darkness in the darkness, you know, and it was brown.
Mhm.
Like it was light brown and there was an eye. You know how a tree looks like it has a knot right there or whatever, but it looked like that, but you could see clearly like it was an eye like this way, like up and down instead of that way.
Right.
And we were like, dude, what the heck is that? Like he just, cause he goes, dude, I feel something. And he's always been able to like feel things in my house I used to live in.
Right.
Like the first time he walked in there, he was like, dude, your house is haunted. Like he just blurred, you know how he is. He's very, how do you describe him? Robotic,
But in the sense that like he's not blunt to be rude or like to. He just kind of says what's on the top of his mind in the way that like you would input a code. You know what I mean? It's like it's
he
not
just
like
says it, man.
Yeah.
Like he
No
comes-
filter, right?
No
Pretty
filter.
much.
And he's actually got a condition, not Tourette's, but it's something else. I don't remember what it was, but he came in the house and he's like, dude, this place is haunted. And we used to work out at B Cave's gym, and I think I've talked about it on the show, and we all had this weird experience out there. Very brief, I'll say it to you because you probably haven't heard it, but we were up the front and we heard all the lockers in the back being closed. And this gym at that time was like the last thing in B Cave's. There was nothing beyond that. It was just woods
Right.
and Dogman, probably, you know? And so that's all there was that. And then everything else with the HEB and all that was in front of it. And so we were sitting there one day, and that's when Bone started talking to my friend Bane, who was a strongman competitor. And we were training out there at B Caves, and that's why I was going out there to train Bane. And he said, dude, did y'all hear that? And Baines was working there. And so we all walked to the back. We were all at the front. There was nobody in the gym. It was an overnight gym. It was a gold gym. We walked to the back, and all the lockers' doors were open.
Wow.
But it sounded like somebody had closed them all. So this stuff is so weird, right? So then we started talking about my house, and he tells Bane, he goes, have you been to Wolf's house, dude? He goes, this dude's house is like really, really haunted. Like it's bad. And I was like, yes, dude, yes. And I don't want to talk about it. Like going to the gym is the one time when you're away from it. You know what I mean?
That would be more of a significant event because maybe that wasn't closing, but you hear the latches going up, which sounded like the lockers were closing.
No, it was like a slam, dude.
It was a slam. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that's weird.
And then when you go back there, they're open.
and
Yeah.
all of
I
them
don't
too. I thought isn't that what was weird? It was like
Yeah.
every single one
Yep.
was open.
How many lockers about? You know?
Oh, probably 100.
Wow.
I don't know. It was a big gym. I mean, it's a big gym.
Wow.
Was there anybody else in the gym or using the gym at that time?
No,
Uh,
because that
that's
back area was huge, and it had like this big open shower area, which I didn't like because you had it's like prison rules, you know.
Yeah.
But so you go back there, and one time I had to shower because I had to go to a morning post, and I was training, and like I said, I was helping Bane because he had a competition in Europe, and he was getting ready to go back. And it's funny because you're Basque, right? His dad
Ancestry's Basque.
yeah, his dad was actually from the Spanish Basque,
Mhm.
and because it's in between France and Spain.
Right.
So I was back there. I was taking a shower, and I heard like what I thought was slamming the again, you know. And I know that Scorpion was just around the corner, and he was changing. And we were all like getting out of there, whatever. And the morning people were starting to come in, and there was a guy who had just walked in and was going into the shower, and I just heard it, and we all kind of like, what the heck was that? Because it was like like maybe like 6 of them. So I thought maybe Scorpio was like messing with me, like he had done it, you know. So I come out of there and I'm like, hey, dude, and I look and he's not in there at all. There was nobody there except the guy, the older gentleman that had gone into the shower. So then I'm changing whatever. Then he comes out and he was like kind of looking around and like he's like, did you hear that loud? And he goes, man, these people being here playing around, messing with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up at him. I said, I don't think that's people playing around messing with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what do you think it is? I was like, don't worry about what I think it is.
You don't want to know, right?
Yeah. And then he goes, well, maybe this place is haunted. He kind of laughed, you know. And I'm going, yeah, it is. You know, I didn't say anything. So I walked out, and just to make sure, I said, did you slam the doors? And he goes, no. And I was like, did you hear that? He goes, no. And Scorpion, he's not real imaginative. He's not a very creative, you know. He doesn't really play tricks or joke, you know. He's just kind of like,
Very introverted.
yeah, he's just like, he goes, I didn't do that. Why would I do that? I don't know. To mess with me, he goes, why would I do that? I was like, I don't know. You don't really do that kind of stuff. So, you know, whatever. And so I just played it off. I was whatever. And so I walked up to the front, and the guy that was working there, I can't remember his name, Jason or something like that. He was friends with Bones. And so he had already experienced some weird stuff there. So when I talked to him and I said, hey, have you had anything weird happen? You know, and he goes, well, the other night, he's like, I heard like somebody, like sounded like somebody was kicking and punching the lockers in the back. So I walked back there, and this is weird. He said all of the locker doors were open. He's like, so I just was like, okay. And I just walked out.
Wow.
He's like, and then he goes, I go back up to the front. He's like, and I just start reading my book, and I just pretend like it didn't happen. He's like, an hour later, I go back there to use the restroom, and nobody had been in there. He's like, and they were all closed.
Wow.
And so there was some weird stuff. And then there was a phantom jogger that they would see. And when these guys worked there, they said that they would see this woman run. Not like she was jogging, but actually just run real fast in front of the building. And she was dressed, and of all things, like in a little, this is how it was described to me by Bain. He said it was like a Little House on the Prairie dress with like a bonnet.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's weird, dude. And like, you know, and so it was like a settler, you know, or something. And one time when I was out in the parking lot and I was talking to, there was a female bodybuilder that used to work out there, and her husband usually was with her. And that night she was really freaked out. She was scared. So me and my friend Squid, we walked her to her car, and we heard a scream.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately looked up to the roof of the building because that's where it sounded like it came from.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend Squid was there. He was with me, which he still works downtown to this day. And he's, you know, he's a good friend of mine. And I was like, we all looked up, and she was like, we thought it came from like above us or something,
Mm-hmm.
but it sounded like a shriek, like you know, and it was a woman, but it sounded like a woman shrieking, not screaming for help, but like shrieking.
Mm-hmm.
No,
What?
I was going to say, do you think the sound would be like if someone was pushed off and they were falling?
No, it sounded evil, dude.
No.
It really did. And then
Very
one of the
unnatural,
guys that
yeah.
worked there with Bain, he told me later on that one night when one of the guys was going to his vehicle, because what had happened was she was inside in the woman's restroom or the woman's facilities, and she felt like something had grabbed her on her back, like by her back.
Mm-hmm.
So she came out freaked out, dude. And then when she said when she was trying to walk out, it pulled her hair.
Wow.
So there's something at that gym. I believe it's still there. But whenever we walked her to her car, she was shaking like a leaf. And then that just made her like, literally, like she fainted into her car. She was just like laying there like she was almost like she couldn't take it, you know?
Right.
So her boyfriend worked at Samsung, like he worked like overnight or whatever. And so I called him and I said, hey, dude, his name was James or Jim, whatever. I said, Jim, dude, your girlfriend's just, I don't think she can drive, dude. Something's wrong. It was like 5 a.m. So she stayed there, and we escorted her back inside. And then we left, and then I guess he came and got her in the morning. She couldn't even drive. She was so freaked out. And then I believe they called the ambulance because she was like not able to think clearly. So something had attacked her. And I remember Bain telling me that one of the guys that worked there, I don't know this guy, this was after we quit working out there, that he was walking to his truck and like something flew overhead of him, humanoid-like with wings. And he said it looked demonic. And he told Bain, and Bain never gave me the whole story because after that he ended up going back to Spain and I didn't see him again. We talked, you know, sporadically through Messenger, and then we kind of lost
Did you ever
touch.
research the history of that place, that building?
No, I mean, and I know the Comanches were just terrible, and you know, and they
It's
were
not
all
necessarily
over that
the
area.
building. It's going to be the property.
Yeah, I think the property, because there was a farm there, and for all I know, they could have raided it and burned it and did all kind. Who knows what?
Who knows
because
what they did?
they did a lot of stuff back in the day, and so you got to wonder what was the history of that place? I have no idea. Like you got to wonder, because I know when we were working, and Tony, this might have been when you first started with us. We guarded a CVS or a Walgreens. I remember which one. And,
I think this was before me.
and my little cousin worked there, and I remember it was during the World Series, the year of the World Series, when the Red Sox were playing the Tigers in the ALCS. So somebody wants to look it up. That's the year it was. I don't remember. And I was rooting for the Bo Sox. They're like one of my teams. But I just remember like sitting there, and I had a little TV, you know, a little whatever, and I could watch the game. And I was sitting there watching. And there was a cemetery right next door, and I didn't know that cemetery is known for what they call the Lady in White.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it, but I thought I saw somebody move in the corner of my eye, like some white flash, and it happened 3 or 4 times. Well, the police officer that I got to be friends with, this guy Brian, he came by there and he told me, he says, dude, have you heard of because I told him, I said, dude, is this area haunted, man? I keep having weird noises and there's a cemetery right there, and he goes, and this is in the same little town, whatever. And he says, dude, that cemetery is known for the lady in white. I didn't know what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, dude, he goes, I have seen it. I personally, this is a police officer. And he's like, I saw with my own eyes. He goes, I was driving through here one time when this was all just a piece of land, whatever. And I thought there was a woman knelt down crying. I thought she needed help.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he wasn't from Bee Caves. He was like from Belton. So he says, dude, I ended up, I go over there and I think it was Belton's where he said he was from. And he tries to offer help, whatever. He goes, she gets up and she walks away from me. And he goes, and I'm like, ma'am. And he goes, dude, right before my eyes, she just faded away. Mm. And so I'm sitting there and he's telling me this story and he's like, well, goodbye. And then he leaves. Here's a couple donuts. I'm out of here. And I'm just like sitting there going like, dude, I don't want to be over here with this stuff over here going on, I mean, and then, I was like, that's great, dude. The only good thing about that was that I no longer lived in that haunted house, but I was like, this isn't what I want to do for 12 hours a freaking night, I mean.
Well, it's the people like us. They just attracts stuff like this. I mean, it's just.
You end up by it.
Can you imagine having to work a site like that, hearing a story like that, and then not having a vehicle?
It's like,
That's happened to you.
It's happened to me a couple of times.
It's like that saying in the Godfather. They keep bringing me in.
They keep pulling me back.
They keep pulling me back.
So, Rick, let me ask you more about this woman that she told you she was going to show you a Dogman.
Well, no, she didn't say I will show you one. She said when we got to the certain area in the forest, she says, "Do you want to see a Bigfoot?" As if I can show you a Bigfoot, and my radar went up, and something said, say no." So I said, "No," and she was like, "See, these things need permission for this type of thing. It needs permission to manifest for you." That's it bothered me, and I spoke with my team later. I said, why did she say that? And they were just stumped. They said, "Oh, I don't know. That was kind of weird." And and it's funny when we got back to the parking area. The area before, the trail, then you got a parking area trail that goes up into the mountains to the woods. And we came back. She said, "Well, I guess I'll see you guys later." And she took off across the parking lot, and all of a sudden she was gone.
Wow.
And now I can't say that, if with any degree of certainty that she didn't get in a car that I didn't see, but I don't know. The whole situation was kind of weird, strange.
I mean, it just seems weird. I mean, if someone says specifically, I want to show you any type of cryptid.
Yeah. Do you want to see a Bigfoot?
Yeah, like that. I would be like, I don't want to see any of it.
Either
it's like, I don't know how you have such confidence.
Yeah, exactly.
But that just turns me away.
Either she was psych or she just she had some.
She had it captured. Like, it doesn't matter. I just don't want to see it if you have it.
That reminds me of the old stories about the Bigfoot phenomenon, where they were associated with the old hags. You ever heard of that?
I didn't know Bigfoot phenomenon associated other than the Bell Witch.
Maybe, but I've heard incidents where Bigfoot phenomena. There's an old hag associated with them that appears with them.
Wow. That would be Tiamat then, like Lilith. Tiamat might be the same thing.
Kind of, yeah.
If you look up legends of, let me sit up here, folks. I'm over here looking too comfortable. If you look up like legends of Tiamat and Lilith, now I don't know what you know about that, but Lilith is supposedly Adam's first wife. That's not canonical in Orthodox or
it's kind of myth. It's mythology.
It's a myth. Yeah. Well, let me tell you what happened the other day, and I'm going to say this. This really peeved me off because fair is fair. My wife goes into the bookstore. And they had Christianity. It was Christian fiction, and they had all the Bibles and different versions of it in there as Christian fiction. Yeah. But then when it went to Eastern religions, which I respect them, but they just said Eastern philosophy, religion, and then they had another section for mythology. But Christianity was listed under fiction. Now that's here in Austin. But that kind of aggravated me because if you're gonna call something fiction, then it's all fiction.
Right.
But the story of Lilith is that in the Kabbalah, it's that she was Adam's first wife. And there was an argument, I'm not going to get into it, was very specific and explicit. And she's like, no way, I'm not going to do what you want, I'm going to do this. And Adam's like, no, you're going to do this. And then she argued, and then she left the garden, and the story is that God gave Adam a second wife, which was Eve.
I've heard that.
Yeah,
before.
and so Lilith went out and created a virtual army of demons. But the same thing is in this. There,
kind of like
again,
a Nephilim type situation.
yeah, kind of. But when you look at the story of Tiamat, the Sumerian goddess, did the same thing.
Yeah.
She created an army of these villains. One of them was the Hairy Man, and the Hairy Man was actually a little bit smarter than some of the other ones. It was just filled with rage and whatever. The Hairy Man, which is obviously a Sasquatch. It was given it was part human, just like the others, but it was given a task. Like you could give the task to perform. One of the things that was believed by the Sumerian sorcerers is that if you were a conjurer, you could summon the Hairy Man. These were like flesh and blood beings, and you used like a horn to call them in, kind of like the shofar horn.
Right.
My friend Kumbo, who talked about that. Actually, I was supposed to talk to him today. CVS. Scorpion just said it was CVS. Okay, thank you, Scorpion. That was we know now that it was a CVS.
Thank you, Scorp.
Hopefully, we don't get sued by them. This is CVS. The whole point was that was where I was working. But anyway, the doing security overnight when they were building it. The legend of Tiamat. It's very interesting. Now, I talked to somebody who was I talking to the other day about this? Oh, it was David Weatherly, and he was talking about a Sufi mystic that he had made friends with. Well, I read some of the stories of the Sufis, and they're very like them and the Zoroastrians. They get into a lot of ancient stuff. And there was a story I read of a Sufi mystic and what he did. He actually communicated with these beings, and he said there's different levels of these beings, and they all perform specific tasks and do specific things. So when you summon or do all these things you shouldn't be doing, you get the ones that you're asked to do, perform, or whatever. And one of the creatures that came up was the Hairy Man. And when I asked this guy, I messaged him, and he didn't really didn't speak very good English, so there's a little bit of a language barrier there. And I got basically a third party to kind of communicate for me. And he said what he's trying to say, and this was a Pakistani guy, but he told me, he says, dude, what he's trying to tell you is that there are very specific types. To them, there's jinn. And he said that this thing, the Hairy Man, is a type of jinn. But and just like the others, they were originally flesh and blood. So you have two types, according to them, of the Sasquatch, which is the Hairy Man. One that is of a bloodline that still exists, and it's very much flesh and blood. But they are mixed with an angelic, from the angel realm, whatever, mixed with humans. But there's also the ones that are passed over or die, and then some that have never fully been corporeal. But they all kind of have the same function and same ability, but they've kind of like segregated into different groups. Like there's different kinds.
Right.
Just like there's different races of mankind, there's different races of these beings, and they're both. There's a flesh and blood, and then there's one that can be both. One is basically more spirit than flesh, and the other one's more flesh than spirit, depending on where they want to live. They have, unlike us, the option to live either zone.
Right.
According to what was told to me. Now, I'm not, like I said, folks, I'm not saying this is what I believe. This is just what I studied and what I was told, and I tried to. The language barrier there again is not, and I didn't speak his language, and so it was hard asking this guy questions, especially when they're talking quickly in another language. But you get somebody to try to translate. One of the things I do believe is that there's layer upon layer upon layer of visitation. And now, whether you believe it's extraterrestrial, interdimensional, ultra-terrestrial, whatever, inner Earth, I believe that this stuff has happened over and over and over again. I believe that. Here's another thing, Rick. I don't know if you've heard of this. I was told by another person who I want to say his name, but he's a colleague. he did some research. Now he's possibly writing a book about this, so I don't want to get too far into it, and I don't want him to think that I'm stealing his thunder because he, So anyway, let's just suffice it to say, there's a person that's writing a book probably pretty soon, and part of what he's writing about is the communication between the extraterrestrials that came here, and the extraterrestrials found this particular group of extraterrestrials, which they call the Zeta, right? Found an ancient technology, which is interesting because they came here like hundreds of thousands of years ago. But they found an ancient technology that predated them by like 1 million years or something. And they used that technology to wake up a matrix. Have you heard of this?
No, I've heard several theories along those lines. There's a lot of theories out there. People come up with this. I mean,
that's all we do here.
Well, it's all theoretical because, we can't really prove any of this stuff, even if you see something, what did you see? Yeah. But, there's a lot of theories about, the extraterrestrial connection with humanity. If you go back to the old Zelensky or abductee phenomena or the contactee phenomena or contactees in the 50s and 60s, they would, their contactees, their aliens were, these Nordic-looking people, women, men, that would impart some type of special knowledge, always, having to do with a theological knowledge that they, supposedly they had. But what's funny is if you get several different alien species, so to speak, that tell you all this theological information that contradicts, Christianity, then you'll have another alien species that will contradict that alien species as far as their rendition of, Christianity, who Christ was and what he was here for and that type of thing. A lot of these alien civilizations or alien contacts, they always try to reduce the divinity of Christ. For whatever reason, they always try to reduce the divinity aspect of Christ.
Always.
And it's strange because when I was working with MUFON, I did some abduction research, and then I found out about a state section director in Florida by the name of Joe Jordan. He was doing abduction research, and he found out that one of his clients was able to stop an abduction just by mentioning the word Christ. And he found that out, and he started promoting this idea among his abductees, and then it started to work for them. For example, a woman would, these grays would come to her room at night, stand at the foot of her bed, and she'd say, "In the name of Jesus Christ, leave me alone." All of a sudden, they would flicker. They turn into an ugly beast, then flicker back to the gray, then they would dissipate and go. And
that brings up the question: are demons,
are they demonic forces,
or aliens, demons, or demons, aliens, or both? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know if they're the demonic imitating the alien culture to garner interest. Because
I was gonna suggest when I was hearing this is that if they were gonna deceive you in some way and they were gonna say like, "Oh, we're aliens," the only reason I would think of why they would do that is that like you can't really stop alien abductions. Right. Really, like if you're getting abducted, you just think, well, life sucks
you're
now.
Stuck, yeah.
It's like, but if you know like they're demons, you'd be like, okay,
that gives you the power.
I know exactly how to identify them and attack them using the weapons.
If they are demonic, they know that our culture is we're in love with sci-fi, with the concept of aliens and because of Star Wars and all these other shows.
We don't want to be alone in the
universe. Exactly. We're enamored with science fiction and alien technology and technology in general, and I think it might be a inroad for them, to get us trick us. But who knows what the truth is?
I was gonna read a couple questions here. Mimi had a couple questions for the both of y'all. First for Rick here. He said, what do you think about hybrid humans?
Oh boy, here we go. Now we're going down the rabbit hole. I've got a lot of theories on that too. I believe there's a hybrid program going on, but I don't know if it's an alien civilization or if it's a demonic force that's creating these hybrids. You have to understand the demonic and their psychology. The demonic will try to replicate God's ability. If they can splice, we have to understand the demonic in general, the angelic. The angelic intellect is much more superior than we are. It has a much more superior intellect than we have. When they were created, back before time, matter, space existed, God created the angelic realm, and he infused in the angelic realm certain knowledge. It's not like that an angel grows up learning stuff. Mm-hmm. When they're created, at their creation, they're infused with knowledge. It's like a computer download, just almost instantaneous. And depending on what level of angel they are, that's the amount of knowledge that God gave them. Now, the angelic has complete knowledge over the laws of the physical universe. They know the laws of physics better than we do. And if they can use that information, and to manipulate us or get us to, think that they're some type of alien civilization, they'll do it. And I have a feeling that they might. I can't prove any of this, so don't jump me, don't scream at me. It's just a theory on my part. This is what I do at campfires when I go camping. I sit and look at the fire and I think about all this type of stuff. But what if they can create some type of hybrid race? Try to emulate God and His creative abilities, and and for nefarious reasons. That's a possibility. I'm considering, but I don't know if it's an alien civilization or a demonic force that's trying to create a hybrid race. I don't know.
There's actually even a third one. It could just be man. It could be the government doing something that
Very
they
much
shouldn't
so.
be.
And that meets another theory that I have. I think a lot of the people within the government, you have certain government agencies, government entities that are into the occult, mm-hmm. and automatic writing, whatever they're into, to garner information and technology. I think there's a document that was released not long ago, and I think it was not long ago. It was 1947. And if I could pull that document up, you could probably research it.
And I'll ask this to you while you're doing that.
Okay.
Mimi also asks, have you heard of Hairy Man Road in Round Rock? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's called Hairy Man Road for a reason.
Yeah.
Bradford Johnson, he says, I feel what the reptilians there are, and they smell like reptiles or snakes, very same smell. Stinky. I had a garter snake infestation. Of all black racer ones, I would never forget that smell. Also, Bradford, your son is in the hospital. If there's anything we can do to help, he says that when he needs all the prayers he can get. In fact, I'll donate whatever goes from the chat tonight. We'll donate that to Bradford if that will help you. I recently got a large donation from someone who. I don't. His name is Michael. I'm not gonna say his last name. I don't know if he wants me to say that or not. But he gave us a very large donation so that the conference could go on. And although it doesn't cover all of it, it definitely helps keep us in, so that we can continue to do what we have to do to pay for the conference, because the conference is it's a big chunk of money. But that blessing was to us. We want to give you something. So whatever donations we get tonight, we will send that to you, Bradford, if it will help ease, or anything we can do to help you, with your son. I wasn't dealing with the conference and I didn't have a bunch of money to pay. I could do a lot more, but I'm, and I need prayers too, folks, because business it's not been stable. It hasn't been terrible, but it hasn't been great. And so everybody needs prayers, but this man, his son is dying. And I've never seen you ask for anything before, Bradford. You're not asking now, other than prayers, but I will. I want to donate the money that we get from the chat tonight to you. So I'll discuss that with you. Just text me or email me after the show. We can do that, right?
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so.
Do you have that?
Okay, this document that I was referring to, it's interesting. It's called document number 6751. It was written by academics in 1947, and it had to do with the crash retrievals that the government was involved with, the Roswell crash retrievals, as well as several others. And they said that there were certain government agencies that were using, and I'll quote from the memo here. It says they were using supernormal means of communicating with these alien entities, or supposed alien entities, and a lot of it's for technology. Now, if they're into the occult and they're doing automatic writing or remote viewing or whatever technique they're using to contact these entities through these supernormal means, who are they talking with? Could they be talking to an alien civilization or a demonic force for technology? I think it's a deep dark road that they might be traveling down if that is in fact what they're doing. So
we had this conversation, like we've been having this conversation for the past couple of weeks about like demons or aliens. Like what is it really? And we kind of threw up we kind of postulated over some different theories about like, if it's just demons, it kind of opens up a kind of whole new realm where it kind of just is like an inkling of how devious they can be, about how willing they are to just spread out their evil, and how different of a manner it can be when it's really just one thing. And if it is all these other things, then it changes it, because it becomes it to where like it's going to be so hard to really pinpoint or able to identify and really learn or understand any of it if we have to have this many different avenues of things that we don't understand, and we're not able to focus it down into like demonic aliens and stuff like that.
The demonic, not only can the demonic be devious, but they're very intelligent at it. They've been doing this.
They have thousands of years on it.
Well, they've been doing this since before time even existed. They've been watching us, and they're pretty. They know exactly.
And like you said, they look at us as talking monkeys.
Talking monkeys, pretty much.
They really do. They look at it. And even if you look at the Quran, neither one of us are Islamic, but it lays it out there like Iblis, which is the Islamic version of the devil. She's a shaitan. He's the head of the shaitan. And he said, I'm not going to supplicate anything to these people. I'm better than them.
Right.
And God's like, no, you're not. I created them, and they have dominion. And he's like, no, he refused. Now, one of the things that's interesting, and I've said this before, demons, they never called Jesus the Son of Man. Jesus it was almost like he was I don't want to say flaunting, because he wasn't arrogant, but he was very confident, and he would call himself, behold, for I am the Son of Man. Introducing yourself in that way. And the demons, the devils, whatever, they chafed under that, because they're like, I don't like the fact that you are calling yourself Son of Man, because Son of Man connotates that you have dominion over us, because you're confessing I am of the flesh and my Father the Spirit. So I always thought that was kind of a punch in the face to them, because they didn't they would refer to him as a son of God because they had to. They knew that he was divine, he was a son of God, but they never wanted to call him the Son of Man, because that makes a connection between him and us.
What it does is the demonic, they don't like the concept that Christ is both human and divine. He has a human nature and a divine nature. And they consider that when God came down and became man, they frowned upon that, because they view man, a material being, we're composite spirit material. As a material being, they look at us as subnormal. It's kind of like a supremacy that they have over man, and as a being and as a body. So when they look at God, when they look at Christ, and he became man with a human nature and a divine nature, they kind of frowned on that. And it because when he died on the cross, his human nature died, and the humility he showed actually it tears them apart, because the demonic, their strength is in pride. Christ and Christians, their strength is in humility. And, like the Blessed Virgin Mary, a lot of people don't get the Mary thing with Catholics, but Mary, her strength when exorcists speak with the demonic and order them to tell the truth, and they can tell the truth if they're ordered to, with authority of Christ. They say that Mary's strength was in her humility. And, that's it. And her nemesis was Satan himself, because when she ascended to heaven, she took his place in heaven. So that was his nemesis. So when an exorcist finds out that they actually have Satan himself as a possessor, they call upon Mary, his nemesis, and he's usually defeated that way.
Well, and see, now a lot of people, there's a lot of theology in what you just said. A lot of Protestants don't give Mary a lot of credit because they believe that Catholics have deified her.
No.
See, and here's the thing. I've explained this on the show too. I'm not a Catholic. I'm not Orthodox, but what I do understand what that means in intercession.
Right.
Some people believe, this is the confusion here. I'm going to explain this to my listeners. Once again, I will say this: when you pray to someone, that word "pray" is an Old English term, which means to beseech.
Yes.
And so when you go to a saint and you say, "I need your help," I beseech you. A lot of people are taught in the Protestant faith that you're not supposed to do that at all. You're only supposed to pray to God. But the mistake that a lot of Christians make too is that they pray to Jesus in the form of worship.
Mm-hmm.
You don't worship Jesus. You're not supposed to. I'm sorry, I tell people is they get upset. Jesus does not. Every time in the Bible when someone goes to him, he tells them, "Get up. No, you worship God. You don't worship me." And people will bow down to him, and he would always tell them to stop. And that's one of the big issues. Like I argued with an Islamic friend of mine. Well, he's been on the show, Stefan. He's always goofy. He likes to go back and forth with his theology, and we go round and round. But I told him, I was like, "You'll never convert me. It doesn't matter. I'm strong in my conviction." But he says, y'all shouldn't be worshiping Jesus. And when have you ever seen me worship Jesus? Mm-hmm. When I pray to God, this is how I pray. I say, "Lord God, I come unto you in the name of Christ.
Right.
And I ask you this in the name of Jesus. If it's done, it will be your will."
Mm-hmm.
That's how I pray. Now, everybody can pray however you want, but prayer, though, I don't pray to saints, but I understand it. I understand what it means to
prayer doesn't
someone.
necessarily mean worship.
It doesn't mean worship. Now, anything can be worship. People, folks, I'm going to tell you this right now. Everybody that's listening, you worship your phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sorry to say that, but everybody is guilty of this. It's idolatry.
Mm-hmm.
You wake up, and I do this because it's this darn electric leash, and I sit here, and I'm like, what do I got to deal with? I don't like the phone, actually, but it's like a necessary evil, and I'm like, oh, God, text message from, I didn't take Lord's name in vain. I said, "Gah."
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't do that, but it's "gosh." That's another pet peeve of mine. But anyway, I look at my phone and I'm like, I got to deal with this. I got to deal with this. I got this, and I got this person to interview, this person to talk to, blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on and on. And then it goes on all day.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at that phone more than I'm in communication with God, Christ, the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. That phone is all-encompassing because that's your window to the world. Right? Now, I had a remote viewer actually who claimed to have remote viewed this being who helped create the pyramids, Thought. Now, a lot of people mispronounce, they say Tot or Taught. It's Thought. Mm-hmm. But that also translates to thought, because these words were taken years ago and they were all kind of jumbled together. There's a reason why thought was thought to be, and there's no pun intended, but to constantly be looking at a tablet. Now, that tablet is very reminiscent of like my friends' kids. They're always looking at their tablets. All they do is walk around looking at a tablet. Mm-hmm. Why was Thought always looking at a tablet? Now, this would have been ancient technology. He basically had an iPad. Mm-hmm. And he was messing with it all the time. Of course, Thought's tablet was able to open portals and stargates. It's not long before this thing will read your mind. And I'm wondering if it already hasn't, because I was thinking something the other day, and I didn't even mutter it out loud, and then it popped up on my news feed, and I told my wife, I said, it's getting kind of spooky.
We might have the ability to affect, electronics too.
Yes.
Subconsciously.
Because we are electromagnetic impulses. Yeah.
But, getting back to the Mary thing and Christ thing, he of course, he said stuff like that, that you don't worship me. But he also said that the Father and I are one.
Are one. Yeah, the Holy
and
Spirit.
When Thomas, stuck his finger in his hand in his side.
And the woman-
Thomas said, "My Lord and my God." He didn't refute him. So there is a human nature in it, and that's the mystery: the human nature and the divine nature of Christ. It was settled a long time ago. And with, a lot of Protestants may disagree with Mary, but the reason a lot of Protestants come to me and say, well, why did Jesus call her woman all the time? And the reason he called her woman was because he was trying to make a connection that she is the woman of Genesis who will crush his head. He put enmity between the woman and the snake, the serpent. Mm-hmm. And also she's the woman of Revelations. She's the one that's going to eventually destroy him, with the power of God. She's a creature. She's just like us, but she has a certain special place as being the mother of God. She
was chosen to give birth to the Word made flesh.
Exactly.
So, there's a special place for that.
And as the way she lived her life, she knew what was going to happen to him because Simeon told her what was going to happen to her son. Mm-hmm. And she knew from the very beginning what was going to happen to him, and she just gave her son up because it was God's will. And throughout her whole life, she did God's will without taking the personal cost. Professing a personal cost, the personal cost of doing that. That's why she became, in a special place. And that's just Catholic theology. You can disagree, agree, disagree, whatever.
Yeah, I don't totally agree with everything, but
yeah. But that's. I'm just trying to explain the reason why Catholics revere her. They don't worship her. They revere her for specific reasons. She is the mother of Genesis and Revelations. She is going to be the one to crush his head. If you look at Catholic statuary, mm-hmm. you'll see Mary with her foot on a snake. Mm-hmm. That's what that means.
The Saint Michael, of course, is always the imagery is of him just defeating the dragon,
right? Because
he made war with the dragon,
right? He is the only one that stood up when Lucifer rebelled. He said, "I will not serve, non serviam." Michael was a very low-level angel compared to him because he was a cherubim. Michael was just an archangel, which is second from the bottom, and he challenged him and said, "Who is like unto God?" Which is what Mikael means. Who is like unto God? He challenged him. And the war broke out. Not a physical war, but it was a war of proposition, intellect that the angels fought.
Well, now wait a minute. It was said that there was a war in heaven.
There was a war in heaven.
And that and didn't Jesus say that he beheld Satan fall to the earth like lightning?
But it wasn't like they didn't have physical swords and fought and anything like that.
Well, no, because they didn't need swords.
No,
things were done through light
and
vibration. That's how they fought. That's how the spiritual world is vibration and light.
It was kind of an argument, a proposition of argument, and just they were overwhelmed because.
Do you think that maybe that's why demons seem to look at us as lesser? Because if you really look at it as like the spiritual world as like the starting point of being able to battle or do anything of the sort, us not having that ability or having that connection to the spiritual world, or even really not connection, but like ability to use it or manifest it in a way. Mm-hmm. Do you think that that's why they look at us and is like, oh, these people don't even have swords, they don't even have weapons to fight us with, that's why they're lesser than us?
Yeah. Well, they view us as animals.
Yeah, and as you would an animal, you would think like, oh, an animal can't pick up a sword and fight with me, so it must be lesser than me, or a gun.
An animal
that's how we view animals.
An animal can't battle me intellectually.
Exactly. It's like, I could shoot a dog, so a dog must be less than me. Yeah. That's how these demons must really think.
They look at us as animals like that. The demonic. Their intellects are much more acute than ours are.
I was talking to Wolf, but we did a show I think on Sunday, and I said that, do you think that maybe I personally believe that it's actually their biggest weakness is their longevity, because it causes them to be, what is it when you're complacent? It becomes like they're already they think they know everything because they've already lived so long, and their cups become so full that they have no time to refill it. Right. And that's what makes the strength of us is that we're able to.
Most of them, most of the demonic, each angel in and of itself is its own species because they don't possess a body. Mm-hmm. they don't possess a body to differentiate species from
Yeah.
species from species. So what they are is their own entity with their own intellect and free will and their own individual species. And as far as the demonic, each one fell for a specific reason. Their sin differs, but for the most part, their sin is pride. And, if you can attack them on pride, you've got them. Because picture the demonic, very intelligent, very powerful, narcissists. If you look at it that way, you'll get the psychology down.
Yeah.
And, if you prove them wrong, it just, diffuses them, and they just revolt violently because their sin, for the most part, is pride. So, that's why you counter them with humility, and they can't take it. They can't take it. Anyway.
Actually, that reminds me, this was another theory I had a while back that I talked to Wolf about, was that do you think that maybe, as you said, since they don't have physical bodies, do you think that the myths that we had of like Dogman or like werewolves and vampires and, like these myths that are strewn throughout the world, do you think that those happened first and these demonic beings finding those myths then decided, I'm going to use that form because I can't really create a form myself, but since you have created a form for me through these myths, I'll use that as my form, even so I can enter this world?
That's possible. I got a theory on that too. I got a theory about everything.
Yeah.
Again, I can't prove any of this stuff.
none of us
which
can.
going down the rabbit hole of my brain, my mind, which is a dark place. But I think that a lot of these preternatural beings, like the demonic, I think a lot of these cryptids have preternatural abilities. Now, what I mean by preternatural is, if you study, theology, there are three levels of nature, basically. You've got the natural world, which is, where we live, just the natural world in and of itself, the natural physical laws of nature. Then you've got a step higher, which is called the preternatural, which is an ability to manipulate the physical laws of nature. That's the angelic ability. God gave them that particular ability. It varies in degrees, but depending on the angel and what level they are. And then above the preternatural, you have the supernatural. That is the domain of God. Supernatural meaning the ability to create something from nothing. These preternatural beings do not have that ability to create something from nothing. They have to work within the physical laws of nature and violate those physical laws of nature. But I think a lot of these cryptids have a preternatural ability. And what I mean by that is, mind speak. They can disappear, appear. They can appear to float, They can, they have a certain intellect. I think they have a rational intellect. There are different types of souls. And Josh and I were talking about this before we came, before the podcast. But there's different types of souls. Like you've got vegetative soul. All vegetation, all plant life has a specific type of soul or energy force.
It's life.
Life, precisely. And then you've got, animals, particularly, especially mammals like dogs, cats, and so forth. They have what they call a sensitive soul. They don't have, they don't have the self-awareness that we do or the intellect that we do. You go above that and you have a rational soul, which is what the human being is. The rational soul can rationalize certain things. They have an intellect. They have self-awareness. They, that type of thing. But I think, a lot of these cryptids, because of the intelligence that they show in their interactions with people, I think they might have some type of rational soul, which could be an angelic type of soul, because the angelic also has rational souls. Whether it's the angels or the demonic. But it just seems to me, studying these cryptid reports and talking to people who have experienced these cryptids, there seems to be some type of rational intelligence behind them, which would denote some type of rational soul, angelic soul, perhaps. That's a theory I have. I can't prove it, but we go down that rabbit hole again.
And it's easy to do with you, Rick. We can go. Here's one thing I was going to say. Love Cat says demons are spirits of the dead Nephilim. Yes, that is correct on that. Yes, but it's also a broad term, and I believe there's layers, and I can get into that, whatever. But one of the things I wanted to say about the whole demons, angels, aliens. When someone asked me this recently, they messaged me after a show. Not this. Was it the Sunday before when we did 5 hours of Bible theology?
Yeah.
Yeah, we just went down the rabbit hole. They asked me a question, and she's like, so are these, what's the difference between angels, demons, are they all the same, or are they different? And I said, yes. That's how I answered. And what I mean by that is, if you were to take a race of alien beings that were really, really good, that were on a higher vibrational plane of existence, that had affected not perfection, but through the Creator, had achieved transcendence. Okay, then you have a lesser race of beings who are envious and they want to be that, but they don't want to put in the work.
Right.
And they go against what the Creator says, and these are just aliens, right? But they also have souls that are installed in them, just like we do. Okay, think of like Transformers and the Spark. We all have that, the life and breath. Love Cat, by the same token, you said this. Love Cat's got that one right. But then she says over here, she says, animals do have a soul. That's correct too. But I disagree with one thing you say. I'll very politely disagree. You seem like a very nice person. But you said only God can create. I'm going to disagree with you on that, but I'm also going to agree with you on that. And what I mean by that is, God gives you the ability to create. Human beings can literally create tulpas. Now, when you start getting into the copy of a copy of a copy, gosh, I wish I could just show you my mind and y'all would be freaked out and it'd be like a really weird trip. But I got to tell you this, and it's hard to explain it. It's hard to put it into words. I can see it in my mind to try to tell you, but it's hard to put it into words. It's like we are a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, if that makes sense. And then you start getting kind of like, it gets really bad. Once you start having dreams, waking dreams, you're basically creating a reality, albeit very brief,
Is it a physical reality or?
Exactly. And does it blend into now, I did a story one time on a kid who, it was 2 or 3 Halloweens ago. This kid had issues with a scarecrow. And he told me, he's a grown man now in his 40s, but he said, when I was a kid, I was terrified of the scarecrow, and it was moving around in the field. This story, while he was telling me, so I heard like a book like fell off my shelf, and I could not explain how that happened. I was like, are you kidding me right now? But he brought it back out of his dream. And he had this like straw and hay strewn about his farmhouse, with his grandparents where they lived. He knew that scarecrow had some sort, and I just recently got another story about a scarecrow that freaked me out. And it was just like, when I tell that story, y'all are gonna, it's freaky, dude. Yeah. And then today we went to the Tractor Supply store, feed store, to get the pig his victuals. And this African-American girl was there, very friendly, very nice. And she told me the creepiest story when I told her about my show, and I gave her and so today, literally, I got 2 stories, one about giants and one about a demon pretending to be a child.
Wow.
And it was just like I was up all day, that's when you messaged, I was just like, I had just laid it down. I was like, I got to take a nap, and I didn't mean to be rude. Rick, you come into town to see me, but I'm doing it.
Well, I know you're busy. Don't worry about it.
But it was we'll make it up to you. Don't worry. But what was so telling about that was like, we go out there to run a couple errands, and I get story upon story. And it was like, you're slated to meet these people, for them to tell you these things, because you put more and more of it together. And then you go down the rabbit hole, or rabbit holes, because I think there's multiple. Many, yeah. And so what ends up happening is, just for example, you have a race of angelic aliens, right? Who have achieved a higher level of vibration, because everything is vibration, right? They live in a different level, a different density, beyond whatever entities you can communicate with. They're above that, right? Then you have a group of them that are below them, but are envious and jealous and very warlike, but they're defiant and they don't want to follow the laws of creation and whatever God says. They are standing in the river trying to make the river go the opposite way. They're trying to make the clock move the opposite direction. There is nothing you can do to change the will of God, and you're going to go against the will of God and against nature and by extension, man. Okay? And that's what they're doing. So they could very well be aliens, but they're still evil, and they're still doing evil, and they've wrought evil upon all of us. So it really doesn't matter. It's a moot point whether or not they're aliens or they're demons. You could be arguing whether this is, black or it's, some sort of navy blue. What's the difference? It's a dark color with a contrast on it. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It's like, oh, he's a blood, he's a Crip. Well, when I was working government housing, they were the same thing. You needed to know the difference and the intricacies of it. But what did it matter whether they were a Latin King or a Blood or a Crip or whatever? They're all going to be a problem at some point.
Right.
Now, if you were in those gangs, I am not a gang member and I am not a part of anything. I'm not affiliated with anything, so please don't come after me for that. Just watch my show and whatever. But the point is, you're working government housing. You're not affiliated with any of these guys. They're all killing each other and they're doing what they're doing, but they're all bad guys. That's how the gang task force looked at it. Everybody who's dealing drugs, whether it's heroin, crack, cocaine, whatever, they were doing meth. The cops just looked at them as they're all the same. But they would look at themselves as distinctly different. They'd be like, no, bro, I only sell that, that smoke. I smoke killer, whatever. I sell it, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, but you're still breaking the law and you're still in my AO. And I'm forced to deal with you.
They have different codes.
Yeah, different codes. But what at the end of the day, it's all the same to me. That's what I mean by these demonic entities. It doesn't really matter whether or not they're of alien origin or they're demons. To me, it doesn't really matter. The bottom line is we know that there is a spiritual hierarchy, and I don't care what anybody says, bad guys don't play together. That's why you have different gangs. And I was very successful at doing my job in all the facets of the different realms that I was in with my responsibilities as security or whatever I was asked to do. And I've done a whole lot of stuff. I knew how to play the game, and I knew how to exploit differences within the evil because they're not together. Now, if all of the gangs and these, we'll take Palo Santos, for example, Anthony, Tony, I worked there to 2019. My job was to evict almost 70% of the complex.
Wow.
And I did it. I got it done. There were different gangs and there were different drug dealers and they were all doing something different. Now, there's two of you. It's you and one other guy against everybody in there. 70% of them are bad guys. So what do you do? You have to make friends with some of them.
Yeah.
You can't just go out there like John Wayne and be like, you're all going to do what I say. And then you're going to get shot dead right there and it's over.
Don't play superior,
Exactly. You make friends with the biggest, strongest ones, and then you get rid of the small, and then we work your way up, and then eventually your reports get to where they need to be. You do what you got to do, and then you affect the evictions, and it's over. Doing that job, okay, you have to be careful. You have to be tough when you need to be tough, but you also have to be smart. And the one thing you always remember is they're not all friends. That's the good thing. We are all on the same team as the good guys. We're all working together, and there's a hierarchy, and everybody understands it. Over there, every single one of them was the alpha male.
Yeah.
That was the problem. Every one of them was in a
fractured organization.
Yes. So you can exploit that. And so that's one thing that people don't get. They just do not get. And when you give these entities this authority, you're like, they have this hierarchy. They always pick Lucifer. Lucifer's at the top, and all the other ones are below him. And they have and they have an army, and there's corporals and generals and soldiers. Bull crap.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't believe that for a second, because if they had that kind of organization, we'd already be done.
Yeah.
You know how many demons and princes of hell and all these other dudes, these wild names they come up with, they give you all these wild names because they all think that they're the alpha male. What is above is as below, right? And what is in heaven is here. The spirit world mimics us and we mimic it. It's a mirror image. So I'm telling you right now, if you go into my gym, okay, and I don't mean Red Cyclone, I mean like, the boxing gym, or you go into the weightlifting gym,
right?
Everybody there is the biggest, toughest, strongest guy around. Everybody's throwing the weights, rah, 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 and everybody's doing all this posturing and blah, blah, blah. I've seen it 1,000 times before. Okay, I did amateur MMA, and I've seen some guys that look like they worked out on their bodies for years. I'd get off a bar stool and just beat the crap out of them. You wasted 9 months of your life.
You can't tell a fighter by his physique.
You cannot. And I had a very low-key athleticism. People did not see it coming. Speed was my thing, and I'm a big guy.
Little guys, you got to be careful with.
They don't believe it. They think that a big guy is going to be slow, and you're going to want to grapple him, and they're not. But you don't understand. There is no real hierarchy. All these people all want to be the alpha male, and everybody thinks that they're the baddest guy on the block until somebody knocks them into another dimension. These guys, every one of them, they're the king demon, king devil, and they're this and they're that. Okay? But you give them power, and what you do is you're saying that they have the same organizational skills and levels that the heavenly realm of God and Christ have. No, they don't. And that is their Achilles heel, and that will always be their Achilles heel. Gangsters always kill gangsters. Demons will kill demons. They don't have any.
In hell, everybody hates everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you know, and the reason a lot of the demonic when they get expelled from a body or a person, they have to catch it. They catch it from everybody, and because you know their sin is pride. When you hurt their pride, it's like taking a knife, you know, spiritually, and just cutting their heart out. Because they go down and they get harassed, they get beaten, they get punished. It's not the same down there. No.
And then
You're right about that.
There's the abyss too, which spawns its own. You know, I've talked about this before too. Somebody asked me this question. It was an NDE. A very horrific NDE where I don't even like to talk about it because this person went to the abyss. Mm-hmm. He said, I went to hell. First of all, he told me he went to hell. And he started describing all this torture and torment. I said, who was torturing and tormenting you? He said, these demons, these devils, whatever. I said, that in hell, everybody's suffering.
Yeah.
It is kind of like a giant prison, you know, like depending on what level you go to or where you end up. But a dark place where demons hold sway and literally have their own court. That's not necessarily hell. That's the abyss.
Yeah.
That's what they're opening up in CERN, is the abyss.
Oh boy. Don't get
so
involved with CERN.
Yeah, when you get into that, it's like, why? Somebody asked me that. They said, well, what's the difference between the abyss and hell? There is a difference. Hell is a state of being that anyone can end up in. Okay? Now, Anthony, are you mic'd up? No, gosh, dog it. Anthony had made a point. Rick, I wanted to tell you this while you were on the show. He said that what is the passage where you quoted the other day? He says, there's the microphone. This is important.
I don't know exactly where the passage is at and exactly how it goes, but to paraphrase it, there's a passage somewhere in the Bible that says, hell will be cast into the lake of fire. And it struck a chord with me because I always thought hell and lake of fire are two different words for the same thing. But so if hell is being cast into the lake of fire, that implies that they're two different things.
Well, from what I understand, I'm just going by what other people have told me from what I've read. Hell, there are different levels of hell, just like there are different levels of heaven. And you know, some are worse than the others, from what I can understand. I'm no theologian, and I don't know all this stuff. You know, I'm no theologian. I don't know this stuff perfectly, or have a great deal of knowledge. The only thing I know is that researchers and lecturers have said that, theologians have said that there are different levels of hell, and there are different levels of heaven.
And Dante's Inferno was sort of a fictionalized version of it.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Some people claim that he saw something, had a vision or whatever.
Yeah. He popularized that whole concept.
The inner circle, and
But you were talking about aliens and demonic. You know, I've struggled with that since I was with MUFON. You know, I believe that considering the vastness of space and the universe, I think it's kind of almost impossible for there not to be some other type of life out there. Mm-hmm. But I've struggled with that. You know, Catholicism and the concept of not angelic, but alien beings populating the universe. But then I came up with the question: maybe there's life out there, but what type of life? do they have the same type of soul that we do, or do they have like a hive mind type of structure? You know, kind of like, what is it on Star Trek, that the Borg? Maybe they have a
Borg, yeah.
Borg type of mindset or structure, social structure. So, you know, maybe there's life out there, but what type of life? We really don't know. But
Well,
yeah.
Carl Sagan, like I've said this before on the show, to quote him, and he wasn't a Christian at all, but he said we're looking for life as we know it. We should not only be looking at life as we know it, but life as we don't understand it.
Exactly.
Because life as we don't understand it could be silicon-based, and a lot of people don't understand that. And I worked in a place where what we did was stripped, and I didn't work very long because I didn't like dealing with the chemicals and stuff, but I was trying to learn a trade other than being downtown, being a ruffian, whatever. And so I wanted to learn something, and it was stripping, what do they call it? Semiconductors from the precious metals. And one of the things that I learned about that was that you have, I'm trying to put this into words, even in the most caustic of environments, something can live. And that was something that struck me. Like there was a guy that I worked with that claimed that in the caustic, that was literally what we called this soup that we would use to cleanse this stuff. That there would be this type of like mold or like whatever that would grow in the bottom of it. And I'm like, how could that possibly be?
Yeah.
Now knowing what I know, and he says, dude, there's something to this. And he was like wild hair. He was a scientist by trade, but he had kind of gone off the rails, and now he was working for this company, and he was like big nerd guy, but nerds run the world.
More like Doc Brown and less Michu Utagi.
Yeah. He was very much, what do you understand about this is that these chemicals, they have these beings that live in them and blah, blah, blah. You know, being in my early 20s, I was like, this dude's off his rocker. This guy's full of crap. But then later on, you're like, oh my gosh, this dude was like, Eddie, we called him. He was not crazy. He was onto something. And I told me and my brother be over there like, you know, of course we're stupid. Like we're over there, you know, at our lunch break going like, look at this guy, he's crazy, dude, you know?
Yeah.
And then I look over and the guy that I'm joking with, he's smoking a joint and getting ready to go back and work with cyanide. And we're making fun of Eddie for being a goofball. I never smoked a joint when I was there. I promise you, I was always sober working with chemicals. And then I thought about it and I was like, who's the dummy here? Because y'all are smoking a joint and you're going to go work with nickel stripper and cyanide. I was always good with chemicals. And when I was a kid, I destroyed the backyard by creating this, well, it's not important, but I used a chemistry set to destroy the fire ants in our yard, but it blew humongous holes in the yard. And so my dad whooped the living crap out of me, which he did anyway, for everything. But I did something really stupid, and I thought, oh, look what I did. The fire ants are gone, but now we have huge holes that I've blown in the yard. And then the police came, the fire department came. There was a whole...
So you took it to a whole new level, right?
Yeah.
You didn't take firecrackers and throw it.
I was doing some stuff, and my mom was like, no, you know, he wants to be a scientist. And my dad's like, well, he's 10, or I guess 9. You know, he's got a long ways to go to be a scientist. No. And I think a lot of the way that he approached me, though, too, discouraged a lot of things in me that I shut down because he did not know how to teach anything. Smart guy, smartest guy you'll ever meet. Mother and father, both math geniuses, but they could not raise children.
Right.
For lack of, you just couldn't do it.
Gather knowledge, but they couldn't.
Yeah.
Why are people that are extremely intelligent? Why are they kind of eccentric in a way? You know.
Well,
they've got like OCD. They've got like several levels of OCD. I mean, I've known some really intelligent people.
I have OCD really bad.
Well, I do too. I have some, but you know, some people just, you know, they're really intelligent. You look at them and they're like, you know, there's no personality. It's all internal.
Well, Anthony, remember we were talking about this the other day. Okay, so I just read this in, what the heck was it? Was it Discover Magazine? Which one was it? I told you the name of it. I was reading an article about it. It might have been Mental. I read all these science rags, but I was reading this, and I told these guys, my wife and my brother, I was like, we were at the dinner table, and I said, check it out. I read that less than it's between 5 and 7% of extroverts or I'm sorry, of hyper intelligent people. That meaning people beyond the level of 150 IQ are actually extroverted. And that of that percentage, most of those people go into the entertainment industry. Yeah, and it's a very small percentage of the population that they know of. Now, there could be more, but we don't. Typically, very, very hyper intelligent people with IQs above the genius level are very introverted. And I think it's because they have their brains go into overdrive. They don't really function well with other people as far as like when your brain is so preoccupied with so many thoughts, it's very hard for you to interact socially. They come across socially awkward.
They can't externalize.
Externalize, exactly. And they can't relate to other people because when you're a child, and I know this from when I was a kid, being an introvert and then becoming an extrovert, but it was because it was my environment created the extrovert, whatever. I was not as a child. I was kind of reserved. I didn't talk a lot. I got picked on and went inward, with my whatever. And people we moved a little more than, you should, because as a child, you had no stability. Home life sucked. So then you got picked on. And what drove me was like, my dad put me in Kenpo when I was a kid, so I could learn to defend myself. And then I got really good at it. And then as I got older, I was very athletic. And so I became extroverted, but it wasn't my true nature. I believe I was born as an introvert. But that's what happens is people who are hyper intelligent, and I'm not sitting here, I hate when people take it the wrong way. They're like, oh, this guy's full of himself and blah, blah, blah. I'm just opening up and I'm being very honest. And then I get attacked for it. But at the risk of being attacked by some goofball that barely watches the show, they'll comment and be like, this guy's so stupid. You're like, did you watch the show? I watched 5.8 seconds and I hate you forever and all eternity. But what I'm saying is I got picked on, and it forced me to be an extrovert and be the loudest person in the room because I had no choice.
Right.
It was like, in order to feel safe, I had to be able to control my environment. And so the best way to do that was just to be hyper aggressive and dominate others, in particular males, and just be like, you're going to have to do what I tell you. I'm going to beat you to death, because that's how people were to me. But it was environment that did that. Now, genetics plays a large part in who you are and what you're slated to be. But I believe that one of the reasons why people, there just aren't very many super smart extroverts, a lot of them are fake it till they make it type people. Yeah. Like these Hollywood people and these reporters, they get on there and they go, the weather today, I am an android, and you're sitting there going like, and then their counterpart, now we're going to go to CBS and see what they say. I'm an android. And then Fox, I'm an android. That's all they are. They're just cookie cutter people who fake it till they make it. They're really not that intelligent. And when their basic IQ is about 120,
people who smile a lot.
Yeah. Entertainers typically, like I read this, it was like, their IQs are not that high typically. They're just smart enough to be, but they're the ones that are the loudest people in the room. So people think of them as these hyper intelligent people, but they're really not. Right. And a lot of them, they don't read. They don't read crap because they don't have time and they don't care and they're already successful. They only read the cliff notes of whatever they're doing. They don't take deep dives like we do, and they're not hyper intelligent ever.
Well, they don't have to think. I mean,
they don't. Everything is done for them. Yeah.
They literally are told how to act. They're literally told what to do. I mean, like,
what's frustrating to me, we're dealing with paranormal, ufology, and the cryptid communities, is anytime, it's not that these people aren't intelligent. A lot of them are extremely intelligent. But whenever you start going beyond the boundaries,
they're closed-minded.
It's like, it's like a too steep a gradient for them. Not that they can't accept it. It's just they don't want to accept it. I don't know how to.
Yeah, it's like they won't let themselves be labeled as.
Well,
it's like some kind of. It's like they see them as a separate. As soon as they allow them to step over into that room,
exactly.
they're less.
In the cryptid world, I can understand. A big hairy, 8 foot tall, 500 pound, primate walking through the forest is hard enough to accept and push or promote than, having something like that disappear in front of you, or walk into a tree, or walk into, and have these special, so-called special abilities. It's hard enough to promote that to the scientific community to get it accepted, and then you have all these other weird activities associated with them that get reported. I can understand why they don't want to go that route, but you're doing yourself a disservice too if you don't actually look at that stuff, because it's data. It also depends on how strong the data is, but it's still in and of itself data, and you have to look at it to a certain extent. You don't have to accept it, but I wouldn't just offhand it, just dismiss it offhandedly. But it's kind of a pet peeve with me.
Yeah, and I think my thing that I dislike is like for me, I've always been under the belief is like I don't know anything. I mean, just plain and simply, I don't know. Part of my
that's
language.
That's probably the best way, is just to approach everything as you don't know. Like we were getting ready to take this gun safety class, and I know how to use firearms. I'm proficient. I think I'm a good shot. I don't know. What do you think, Tony?
I mean, every time I've seen you shoot, you seem to hit at the target. So
yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty good shot, and because I'm farsighted. Actually, I can see further. That's what I need glasses to see right here. It's very weird, but there's not a whole lot of people that are. Most people are nearsighted. One of the things I was going to say, Arthur C. Clarke, okay, and this is one of my favorite quotes, and he says 2 possibilities exist. One is that we are all alone in the universe, and the other one is that we're not, and both are equally terrifying.
Yeah.
When you look at that and you think, dude, people want there to be some sort of intelligent design, and I had an argument with a friend of mine he's an archaeologist. His name's Bennett. He's a smart guy. I got to admit, he's very intelligent. He's got me on a few things. I thought I was smart, but I mean, he knows his field.
Right.
So I was arguing with him about something, and he was right, and I blame the Mandela effect. I'm like, whatever. But when it comes to archaeology, I subscribe to archaeology. It's a magazine. And he says, dude, you read that straight out of archaeology. Don't try it with me. I've been doing this for 13 years. This was a few years ago. And he got me. I said, yeah, okay, I did. So what? But I told him, I said, am I right? He goes, yes and no, but that's already dated. And I'm over there like looking at the magazine going like, what? I was like, okay, all right, 3 years have passed. That's a long time in his field. They've already figured out there's other things, whatever.
Yeah.
He's like, you are smart at knowing a lot about a lot of stuff. He goes, but in this particular situation, you're not. Because I nailed him on one. And that was Göbekli Tepe. And then we were talking about the flood and then Graham Hancock's work, which a lot of it is very controversial. And I agree with it. But he says that's how you get me, because you agree with Graham. But I told him, I said, I agree with Graham because Graham is right, but he's also not right because Graham is not going far back enough.
Right.
He's halfway in, halfway out. You ever seen Boardwalk Empire, where was it Darmody who tells Darmody tells Nucky, he's like, you can't be half a gangster. You're either in or you're out.
Yeah.
That's what I look at with Graham. I love Graham Hancock, but I think he's sort of like halfway pleasing academia and then halfway saying what's real, when he's kind of afraid to go out into the deeper water and say, okay, let's just be honest and cut the crap. We're way older than we thought we were. 28,000 years is not far enough. It doesn't go nearly far enough. And I'll tell you what this is. There is an island, it's Malta. In Malta, they talk about these, there's a legend of a female giant that created this temple. She built it. Now, obviously, it looks like it's made by giants. But when you start looking and going down the rabbit hole, you're thinking, okay, our predecessors, possibly progenitors, are giant beings. They're giants, right? They created all these cities around the world that are now abandoned. Now, how on God's green earth did our ancestors, who, if they weren't technologically advanced, even as far as we are, how did they create these? There's the Incas. They had blocks that were perfectly cut, that weighed like 80 tons. Like, how in the heck did they get them to fit perfectly? Pizarro had said that he couldn't even fit a piece of paper in there. Like you couldn't even stuff paper in that. How does that even? How did they do it? Well, they said
so much precision.
So much precision. They said that it became from the sky people, the gods, the Mayans. The same thing. Now I've actually been in a Mayan temple. It was in ruins, but I went into it. Let me tell you something, man. And there's an altar there too. There was an altar, and it was like covered in whatever mold and whatever. But you could see that it was obviously there had been a lot of things that had happened there. the same thing. They believe that all this technology, all these reliefs that you see, these pictures, all this, there was obviously ancient alien astronaut, whatever technology that helped them do these things. Their temples were facing certain constellations at certain times of the year. Like, how does that happen? These people had no way to do this at all.
Right.
So there had to be something before us, the human race, that taught them these things, or somebody came down and taught them these things, because there's no way that, and then it's a universally held belief that these people all came from the sky. But then you
Like
get
the Anasazi. What happened to them?
them. They came from the earth,
Yeah.
the ant people. Now, when you start looking at the people coming from within the earth, but it all goes back to the same thing, that they originally came from the sky, and that some of them went down into the earth and stayed there. And some of the aliens, and you were part of MUFON, so you know about this, they claim that the sun is radiation is harmful to them. So they were forced to go under the earth. But over time, they become their own
Kind of like
species.
a mantis type of a being.
Well, I mean, the ant people, what are they? I mean, they're giant ant people. They came and they took the Anasazi, what is that? I mean, what is that? Like, were they originally, they probably came from the sky, and then maybe they stayed down below the earth, and then they became their own species. Maybe even at some point you begin to forget where you came from. Because we, as a species, we have amnesia. We can't tell you anything. All we know is that, well, it's the Bible. But there was a book or books that were written long before the Bible. And then it gets really convoluted. And this is a question I had for you. I wanted to ask you while you're in the studio here. You're well read in the Bible, the book of Job.
Not well read, but
Well,
I know
you're pretty well read, and you come from a Catholic background. So I want to know this. What do you know about the book of Job? Because the book of Job was written in Arabic and it predates Genesis. So do you know about that? Because I know y'all's Bible has.
I know about the canonical. Well, the book of Job. I know about Job and his his challenges and stuff that he went through. But anything specific about it? That
Well, okay, and you guys have books that aren't in the King James version
Right.
of So like you have Tobit. Okay, the book of Tobit is like, if you're the average Protestant, you're not going to know what that is.
right, Book of Wisdom.
Yeah,
and
you're
all
not going to
those
have any
things,
of those.
Yeah.
And it's also a widely held belief by Catholicism, Catholic teachings, and you went to catechism, I assume, right?
Yeah, certain degree. Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a. I don't have a PhD knowledge of
But you know what it is, right?
pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
So I was forced to go to please my Catholic grandmother and my aunt. Okay, and I was like, "Mom, why am I going here?" She's like, "Because while they're alive, you're gonna suck up to them." Okay,
Right.
so we're gonna go and do what you got to do.
Oh man.
Literally, she's like, "Just go," because Jehovah they're helping pay for your private school. And I was a kid, right? I was going to Beckett school, which is very expensive, and they were
Yeah.
like, "Well, is it a Christian Catholic school?" My mom and dad are like, "Well, can be, because it's the same book, but
Yeah.
it's not the same book." So I go to catechism, right? And then it was like, I think on Wednesdays or something, and then they're like, "Well, why were you not in church on Wednesday?" And I told the preacher, who was the preacher of the non-administrator, I was in catechism. And then I run off to go play. And then my mom comes and grabs me by the arm and she's like, "Why did you tell him that?" And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
To me, it's like, God is God, right? She's like, "Yeah, but he looks at God differently than they do at St. Mary's."
Yeah.
So,
But,
or
the
Guadalupe.
Catholics, the Catholics, the average Catholic doesn't know a lot about Scripture.
No.
They don't study the Bible like they should. They don't study it. They just, they get a certain amount, and when you go to Catholic Mass, there's an Old Testament reading in each Mass. There's an Old Testament reading and a New Testament reading, and there's discussion about it. But they don't have most. I wouldn't say all of them, but most of them don't have like a Bible study like the Protestants do, and that's. I admire the Protestants
That's
for that.
very apparent.
And
But Protestants also read the Bible, and I've seen them
Yeah.
literally get into fistfights over,
I know.
yeah. And I've started fist fights, not trying to, not me personally fight. I don't want to hit anybody for that, but I got into it with this guy, and we started. And of course, the best place to have Bible studies at the nightclub, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of
after a few, right?
at the end of the night, I was sober. This guy was drunk, and he was Islamic, and he was arguing with another Islamic person. Two Islamic people, because their uncle technically owned the club. But what happened was they were arguing, about religion. Now, my friend, they're from the Levant, but one of them is Shiite, the other one's Sunni.
Oh.
And they got into a heated discussion, and then one of the people that worked there was Catholic, and we started joking about catechism and all this stuff. And I was like, dude, because we goofed off and we never got that serious.
Yeah.
But when I said something sort of from a Catholic angle, I had a Protestant there who was actually from Northern Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Catholic and Protestant Northern Ireland, it's life or death.
Yeah,
so
they're serious.
Yeah, he got very serious about it, and he was like, "Well, I don't put up with any." Well, he said something about Catholics, whatever. I called him Mick. I know, but anyway, I said, "Mick, I'm not Catholic, dude." And he goes, "Well, you're basically saying that praying to saints." And I said, "No, it's called intercession, and to pray is to beseech."
intercessory request or whatever.
Yes. And I was trying to explain to them.
Yeah.
And so then both of the Muslims were like, well, that's idolatry. So then next thing you know, there's this big argument. And at that time, unfortunately, my brother was a Satanist.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the way that he actually worshiped a devil. He just believed in that do what thou
It's
wilt
a philosophical.
crap. Yes.
Okay.
And he didn't believe in any morality. He's very regretful now, and he's a very diehard Christian. But at the time, and he says, y'all are all wrong. There's no, whatever. And everybody looked at him like, okay, well, he's the enemy.
This is a bad recipe here.
Yeah, so we're all sitting there, and three of these people are intoxicated.
Oh, boy.
I wasn't, and I was just waiting to take a couple people, give them a ride home, whatever. And I'm sitting there, and I'm going like, dude, this is like the beginning of a bad joke. But then it turned into a fist fight because my friend Mick, who was very hot-headed, his dad was a cop in New York City, and he had that tough guy mentality.
Oh, yeah.
His dad was real hard on him. He punches my friend James
Oh,
because over the Protestant whatever, right?
yeah.
His dad, being from Northern Ireland, who had come here, and he was like, dude, my dad had to leave because the Catholics tried to kill him and blah, 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 and so we had this big old, and I said, dude, y'all are taking this way too far. Well, a basic philosophical discussion amongst 6, 7 people turned into like a fight.
Right.
Well, a punch was thrown, and then everybody kind of broke it up. And what initially started between two Islamic, and it was the whole Ali versus Muhammad and who had the validity to take over after Muhammad.
Yeah.
And they were like, that guy's like, James is like, you're not even on the same page, dude. Like that's, because he's Catholic. He's not going to believe anything.
I think, isn't the Shia
Shia
part of the Islamic faith, the Shia, I think they believe in a kind of quasi-saint type of.
Yeah, and they're considered like I had argument with my friend who is, I guess you would, for lack of a better term, what would Stephen be? A non-denominational Islamist? Because he claims that he's not Sunni or Shiite, right? Isn't that
Yes,
correct?
that's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, and so he says, we're all the same. We all believe in this. I said, you put up a united front when you're dealing with me. But that's not what Salah said, because Salah is this guy that works for us too. And he's Jordanian. And he said, no, this boy is not correct. He says, this boy does not know what he's talking of. We are different, and what he believes is not. And so you start arguing, you go down the rabbit hole. They can't agree on the time of day. And then you get the Christians, you throw them in there, and there's like 1,000 billion different types of, we were reading the Bible as a kid, and I remember Brother Blair or Pastor Blair and chastising the deacon like hardcore about something that he said to me in Sunday school. He said, that's not correct. That's not correct. And it was about the Virgin Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's such a fear amongst and what Stephen said, he goes, not only do you, he assumed, right, to me, and if you're watching Stephen, there's no hard feelings, all right? He's
Floyd McKiss.
We're friends. He works for me part-time, whatever, but we're good friends. My wife and him go back and forth, we argue, whatever, but it's very friendly. And he's been on the show. We saw something really weird one time. He tried to say, he goes, you guys worship Christ, and then sometimes, Christians worship Mary. And I told him, I said, dude, If there is a Christian worshiping Jesus or worshiping Mary, they're not correct.
Yeah.
But it is considered by some Christian sects that it is a miracle that God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus. Now, I have my own theories about that. I believe that God is tethered to the Holy Spirit and that whoever is tethered to the Holy Spirit is God.
Right.
But I believe that it was ordained by Christ to be, basically the Word made flesh, the Son of God on earth, walking divinity.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why, and this is a question for you too, why would everything that he touched, everything that touched him, including the chalice that he drank from during the Last Supper, men died trying to find the Holy Grail. Men died trying to find the spear of Longinus. You know about Longinus, right?
No.
Okay, I'll tell you. Longinus was the Roman soldier who was charged. His captain, his centurion, the centurion was in charge of 100 Roman soldiers. He went to Longinus and he says, it's time to spear the crucified. What that meant was you go up and if they're not dead, do them the mercy of sparing them, and so that they can their soul can leave the body, whatever. It was a mercy that the Romans did. The Romans had, and I know this isn't a popular opinion, but this is the truth. I don't give a crap what people say. There was an overwhelming guilt of what they did. They were like guilt. They felt guilty, even though they gave the Judeans the choice between him and Barabbas. They chose Barabbas.
Right.
Let us have Barabbas. Give us Barabbas. And Pilate, who had been warned by his wife not to touch the Son of Man, she said that. She's like, your hands, you can never wash your hands. She's like, once you do this, there's no going back. He said, okay, I washed my hands of it. Like, this isn't me. Pontius Pilate washed his hands, sealed his fate, whatever. He was warned by his wife in a dream not to hurt Jesus or to allow the rabble to do that. But he did. Now, there was an overwhelming guilt. Now, if you read, there's several different, Pliny the Younger, I believe, Josephus, there's all these different Roman books. They talk about Jesus, and he used a historical fact. People say it's not. It is a historical fact because they marked down certain people when they were killed. They were considered like, enemies of the state, whatever. Okay, Jesus was one of them, only because the Judeans had said, hey, this guy has offended our God. Now, when to the Romans, who had all these different religions and they had to keep these people under control, if someone came to them
to appease them more
to
than
appease them, yeah, you had to do it, because if not, you have a revolt on your hands.
Yeah.
Which they ended up having anyway, which Titus and his son actually fought in Masada and actually had to defeat them. This is after the temple was split, Jesus was killed, blah, blah, blah. What happened was when Jesus was on the cross, Longinus was charged by his centurion with spearing the crucified. He went up, the one on each side of Jesus, they were still alive. When he speared Christ, Jesus' blood flowed. Blood and water flowed, and it hit him in the face. And Longinus immediately was overwhelmed with all of his sin. And the legends go, there's different versions of it. And in Islam, there's even a legend of it too. There's sort of a hadith that it deals with it. I don't know about it. I haven't read that one, but I know that in various religions even, that he was considered to be like, a very important person.
Yeah.
When he was killed, Longinus immediately took off his helmet. He fell to his knees. He says, truly you are the Son of God. Because he saw all of his sin, everything right before his eyes.
Right.
And he begged Christ for forgiveness. He says, God made flesh, can you, and in Latin, he asked for forgiveness. And it's believed that he was forgiven. And the spear that pierced Christ and that had his blood on that spear, it was
kind of known as the Spear of Destiny.
The Spear of Destiny, yes. Right. And everybody from the Nazis to the Soviets to the Chinese looked for that spear.
Yeah.
Now, the chalice that he drank from before he was turned in by Judas, the traitor. Now, when he drank from the chalice, that chalice was looked for everywhere, from Ireland to Norway. I mean, they were looking for this thing. And it's said to be in 1,000 different places. The Knights Templar, the Rosicrucians, they all looked for it. Everybody looked for it. Nobody ever found it.
The Nazis were deep into occultism.
Mhm.
They were very deep.
Actually,
into
I'm going to
occultism.
tell you something, though. The British were deeper.
Yeah.
They don't get the credit for it, but they were making deals with Aleister Crowley. Literally,
boy.
Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, these guys, they were considered to have opened up. They went to Boleskine Castle, and they opened up a portal that they say ushered in the age of Ur. Now, what that means is basically they started this whole UFO thing. That they created a bridge, like a space bridge, and that what they did was usher in a new era. They sold their souls to beat the Nazis. There are some really, really crazy. If you look at the Soviet archives, go back and read like all of these. They've declassified them, and every year a new one comes out. I'm not even going to get into the deepness of it, but look at the bombing of Dresden, in which Stalin didn't even want to participate because he's like, this is going to be laid at my doorstep by the Allies because it was a Red Cross center.
Right.
It was a neutral zone. There was no military target there, and they firebombed it. What's even, I could get into it. I shouldn't even go there because it gets way too far deep but they were doing magic ceremonies day and night to try to defeat them. There was a pilot who actually flew a Messerschmitt, and this is a story that was kind of like a sideline. It's kind of like when Anna Choate was on my show, and she talked about the paranormal aspect of Fox Hollow Farms. Well, Bill Curtis did a whole documentary on that farm, and it was all just basic history. You know, Herb Baumeister killed at least 50 people that we know of. We found the bones of 50 people, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't say a word about it being haunted or anything else. It was just about his misdeeds. Well, there have been a bunch of paranormal researchers who've gone there and have gotten amazing EVPs. Why don't y'all look up the number to where Anna Choate, whatever that show was, and you guys can go back and you'll hear these EVPs. My point is, though, that there's a little piece of paranormal in all of history. One of the pilots of the Messerschmitt, it was an article that I had read, and it was in military history. Well, there was a guy on Reddit, I believe it was on Reddit, and he was talking about that particular pilot having told Patton that extraterrestrials, or aliens basically, were fighting on both sides. One for the Allies and one for the Germans and the Japanese, the Axis, or Germans, Japanese, Italians, whatever, they're allies. And that he witnessed them actually knocking an entire group of Messerschmitts out of the sky, and one of the British pilots mistakenly shot at it, and then it began to knock their Spitfires. This guy supposedly told all these things to Patton. Then Patton started going down the rabbit hole, and then he wanted war with Russia, which was another thing. I've read his memoirs.
Yeah.
The guy was like, "You give me 2 weeks, and I'll start the war, and I'll make it look like they started it, and it'll be one and done." Yeah. And if people if they actually believe that the Russians kicked the snot out of the Germans, you're full of crap. They were given tons of material and supplies, and they were on their last leg, and the Allies gave them everything, which later Churchill lamented. He said, "We slaughtered the wrong hog." He goes, "Dude, the Soviets have everything now." And then in I believe 1952, they got the nuclear bomb, and then they held the threat of nuclear war over our heads for forever. And it was like, dude, if you're going to beat one evil, beat them both. Get it over with. It should have been done surgically, and communism should have been crushed and wiped out. Then you had the communists in China hanging out, waiting for the Republic Guard to fall to their knees, fighting the Japanese. Eventually, they fled. Chiang Kai-shek, he fled to Taiwan, and then Mao came down and was like, "Hey, yeah, we're here." It looked like Wario. I can't stand any of them, and then he read his little satanic red book, and all these idiots went for it, and you got a million flavors of communism that killed 150 million people, including the Khmer Rouge and everything else in between.
Not to mention those that are missing.
Oh, well, the people we don't know about. I mean, they killed more people than the world has ever seen, but they don't get any credit for it. All you hear about is the Nazis. I think we should get away from this talk of them. Okay, those bad guys are gone. They've been gone for 80 years. We have one now that's here right now at our doorstep called communism, and nobody talks about it. It's like we're not going to talk about the elephant in the room because it's at our doorstep. And the Russians, by the way, are no longer communist. So you can stop with that. Okay? But the point is that it's an ideology, a satanic, evil ideology that was created literally by Satan, I believe, and it was given to people to police us. And the Catholics believe that Nero was the Antichrist, and I believe that there's going to be a weird mixture of communism and Satanism, which is what we're tasting now at the beginnings of here in this country. And I believe that the Antichrist is going to come out of that, and there's going to be a particular country where he's going to come out of.
I think there's organizations in this country, NGOs and so forth, that are, not, I wouldn't say Satanists. I would say more Luciferian.
Luciferian, yeah, they call themselves Luciferian, but because you're right, Satanism and Luciferianism are two different things.
They're two different things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Satan is actually Lucifer, are two different things too.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's both of them. You know, Luciferians, they can have a philosophical agreement with the concept, or they could believe that Lucifer is actually a deity. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Satanism. You know, you could believe in the philosophical aspect of Satan, or you can actually worship him as a deity. There's so many different types.
Different flavors, just like there's Christianity.
Yeah, exactly.
The Temple of Set. The Temple of Set is another one that has a big influence. And I guess, Anton LaVey was not evil enough. He wasn't committing sacrifices the way that they wanted. So they decided that it was imperative. A friend of mine, she also is an archaeologist. She's Berber, and she's working in Egypt. And they're working on something, which I don't want to shoot my mouth off and then it'd be wrong, but I believe it may be proof that civilization goes back at least 14,000 years, because it's supposedly older, and it's a place called, oh God, don't even get me try to pronounce it. It's like in northeastern Egypt, middle of nowhere. And I sent her symbols to tell me a little bit about what I was dealing with, and she sent back, she's like, Sekhmet. It was a Temple of Set. And it was a cult that the Romans actually stamped out years ago at the behest of the Egyptians, because they almost, in Alexandria, which was the capital at that time, they almost managed to overthrow the Egyptian government, which was basically a puppet government run by the Romans. And eventually the Romans had to go into the catacombs under these cities like Cairo and Alexandria and find these people and kill them. Mm-hmm. And what they did was they were sacrificing children. Now, you have this cult now here in the United States, which has made its way in all through Europe, all through the Middle East, all through the Levant, and it came here. And it's now at our doorstep. Mm-hmm. But when you look at some of the doings of these people, they believe in equality, but everybody is pretty much a slave to the deity of Set, which is the Egyptian version of Satan. Yeah. And when you look at communism and Satanism, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think there was a Catholic priest, Father Chad Rippiger, I believe his name was. He did a comparison of communism.
You talking about Rippinger?
Rippiger.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's how he says his name.
He's got a YouTube channel, right?
Yes,
he
does.
Doing it, yeah.
He's got a lot of lectures on YouTube. He also comes out with, there's a book he came out with, The Modern Science of Mental Health, or something like that, or something along those lines. It talks. He's pretty good. He's got a PhD in philosophy, and he's a Thomist, which is he follows Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And who's basically in Catholicism, he's the angelic doctor. And basically what he does is he does a comparison of communism and the demons as far as psychology goes. They're almost hand in hand, psychologically the same. Mm-hmm. Pretty much. It
is. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about how demons have certain, people have certain, like your sin is to cheat, to steal, to kill, lie, whatever. Whatever your sin is, perversion, there's a devil for it. Yeah. And that's their job, That doesn't necessarily mean that there's one guy pulling the strings with the bad guys, because there's not. Because if there was, there wouldn't be just look up, I'm not going to say his name because it gives him power, but look up who the boss demon was when Solomon enslaved them with the ring. Mm-hmm. It wasn't Lucifer. It wasn't anybody named Satan. He had a particular name. Go and look him up. He's a very evil, foul being. And there's a bunch of these. These are fallen. Not all are fallen, though. Some are rebellious. Now, it's two different things. And people don't understand. They can't. And the biggest problem is the time, Rick. They don't understand because if you get one hand tied behind your back and you're in a fight, you're going to get beat up, dude. You can't win like that. Unless you're Jack Johnson. I mean, who the heck knows? I mean, Dempsey, I don't know who's going to be able to win, in a fight like that. But when you hamstring yourself and you say, well, the world's 5,000 years old. There's no way all this stuff could happen in 5,000 years. That's just not going to happen. There you go. Right there. That is going to tell you right there, you lose. You're not going to win. You're not going to understand. You're going to get wiped out. You're going to get hurt. You're going to get beat because you don't understand the layer upon layer upon layer of what has come before.
Yeah. He's repeating what he's heard. He doesn't use reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't, what they don't understand is like there could be more than one thing going on. I believe that what we were looking at with the rebellion, the rebellious angels, they were already here, very possibly. Then the Watchers came, and there were 200 of them, and then they fell. Mm-hmm. But they were possibly deceived and also used by the spirits of the defeated angels that were here before, the rebellious angels that were cast out by Michael. That's one theory. I'm not saying that I hold fast to that, because my theories are constantly evolving, but I do believe that there is some validity to that. There are people who believe that that's what happened, because it talks about how they gave themselves over to Satan. Now, who is Satan? Everybody wonders what that is or who that is, but it's not only, as Tony, you said it in one of the episodes best. You said that it's an ideology.
Yeah. Well, basically what I said was that if you look at it instead of as a group of people or like a being or a race of people, as you look at it more like, I'm not trying to compare it to Islam or that type of thing, but like you said, how like when you are speaking of like a terrorist, you kind of call them an infidel, even though they have their own little sects and they all have their own ideologies and sect,
not sex.
But
something's on his mind.
But they have their own like group, and like even those groups don't mix with each other. But when you're thinking of like, oh, terrorists, they kind of all form under that group, and I feel like that would work the same.
The enemy of you is our enemy, or something.
Yeah.
Some type of adage on there.
But I was kind of saying it's like the same for Satanism. It's like it's not really a person, a group, a being, or a thing. It's more like an idea of like of going against the grain or going against the
going
God,
against the established moral natural law.
The natural law is like as long as you identify.
It literally, the left was it came out of defiance of the right.
Exactly. In the 1960s, the
things.
Sexual Revolution in the 60s, that was all rebellious against all that type of thing.
It was the left-hand path showing itself. The left-hand path has always been there, and it was shunned because there was, quote unquote, the right way to do things. It's not literally, it was taken literally, but and it was literal, but it was like the right hand, because Christ had the right hand of the Father. It shows Christ holding his hand up in the famous picture, whatever. So then they show Baphomet doing it with the left hand. And of course he's, a hermaphroditic looking being, whatever, androgynous, whatever you want to call it. And it's supposedly a counterculture thing, and it's like, well, we're going to go against the grain, we're going to go against the right, we're going to go to the left. That's how the left-hand path came to be. The extreme version of it is communistic militants, and when you look at what's going on, it starts off with anarchy, and it starts off with unrest, and it starts off with treason, and then it becomes communism. And I'm telling you right now, I had somebody the other day that said, "You're crazy. You really think this could happen here?" I said, let me tell you, I've seen it happen in about 17 countries, half of which I've been to. I'm going to tell you right now, dude, you have no clue what this is all heading for. It is a very weird mixture, though. It's going to be something like we've never seen. It's going to be the melding of all the bad guys coming together, which really has never happened. The foolish thing is that people believe that, oh, yeah, they all work together. It's always been this way. Think of Lord of the Rings and the orcs. And the humans were all in shock. They're like, when did the orcs start working together and be so organized? That's why we're getting our butts kicked. We don't understand this because Sauron, he came to power. Now, if you know canon within Lord of the Rings, which I'm kind of a nerd for that, I do like those in Star Wars. I know those too. I don't know a lot of others, but I know those. And there was a guy who came before him, Malcor, or what is his name? He started with an M.
Malachor,
whatever. He was Sauron was his apprentice. but he was defeated and sent into the abyss. Well, then Sauron, he bid his time. He took 1,000 years because in elves, they lived for a long, long time, right? So to him, being like this outside of time type being, he pretended to be an elf so that he had an excuse to live a long, long time. But he wasn't. He was pretending. He was evil. And then he was corrupting elves and turning them into goblins and then into different races of orcs and whatever. And what he ended up doing was being helpful and being good. And he helped the dwarves and he helped the humans, and they would go to him because he was smart and he would give them wisdom and blah, blah, blah. What he really was, though, was the embodiment of one of the fallen, really. That was known as that. That's what he did. He taught him war because he taught him how to blacksmith. He did all these things. And they're like, we love Sauron. He's a good guy. Yeah. He was just playing the role. And eventually things start to happen over time. He made those rings, and then he made the one ring, and he had all this power combined into it. He gave part of his essence to it. And then the next thing you know, he corrupted man, and man began to fall. And then from one age to the next, Tolkien, he was tapping into something that Nikola Tesla would call infinite energy. He was riding that wave of the Akashic records. He was seeing it. He was literally going through the ages, 4 ages, Satya Yuga, Tetra Yuga, Dwarpa Yuga, Kali Yuga. That's literally the ages. He was going through the ages, and mankind was becoming more and more and more decrepit, more corrupt, and more laxed. Yeah. And they thought, these orcs, they're not organized until somebody organized them. And I always say this, things are the way they are until they're not. And then when it's at their doorstep, then the humans can't agree on the time of day. Rohan is not, they're not helping, what's the
Gondor,
White City?
Rohan.
Yeah, they weren't helping each
Minas
other.
Tirith.
Yeah, Minas Tirith, and then you had the Helm's Deep, and they were all fighting individually. And the orcs were united, which had never happened before. What people don't understand, though, is they think that this has always been this way. No. What's happening right now is they're all coming together. You're going to see a pseudo-communist corporatocracy where only some of the corporations are allowed to be and everyone else is suffocated. That is literally what's happening in a very large country with the largest population on Earth.
It's going to be a system where you don't own property.
Nope.
You're basically a worker bee and a consumer and an economic slave.
That's it.
That's basically it, But it's just, what's going on in the country today is we're fighting against cultural Marxism. Yep. And if you read Marx and his writings and look at that and what they're doing, they're trying to destroy or reframe our culture. Like the founding fathers are trying to, trying to redefine them and redefine the culture so they can create another culture of worker bees and people who, basically you work them to death and you don't own any property and you're just a, economic slave. And
we're accepting way too much, Rick. When you look at the Super Bowl halftimes, I am not a right-wing extremist. I'm really not I thought, and I'm going to say something, and I hate to say this, but I thought GW was the dumbest president we ever had. I mean, I'm a cowboy. You're not even from Texas, dude. Shut up. He made me sick. I couldn't stand GW. And then now we got this dude. And I'm like, he's like, hold my beer. Like, dude, are you serious? Like, what in the heck we have gone off the rails.
Right now, I
don't want to get politics, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't like politicians in general, period. Yeah. Because if they were good, honest people, they wouldn't be becoming millionaires as a politician.
Well, they wouldn't be politics.
They wouldn't be in politics because you have to be a slimy ball of whatever. A lot of them start off as lawyers. So what does that tell you?
Most of them.
Yeah. How do you get into politics? You'd be a slimy lawyer. I mean, no offense. I have lawyers that are good friends that work right next door, but I mean, they're not in politics. But the point of it is, I'm telling you right here because I'm not I'm not on the left, that's for sure, but I'm not really a right winger because people were like, well, why were you against the war in Iraq and against whatever? Look at Halliburton. Stock goes up 1,000,000% overnight. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously something going on there, and we're all supposed to sit back and pretend like none of this is happening or happened.
There are warmongers on both sides.
Yeah.
And they promote this
there's
stuff.
one family that feeds both sides. Look up the Krupps.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and you can go down the rabbit hole. The point, though, being is that it has infinitely been and always will be a war between light and dark.
Yeah.
But you have to remember something. The dark is not all, they're not all together, dude. That is why if
You're
you
right.
look at, if you look at like World War II as a prime example, the Nazis and the communists, you know, we may have chosen to ally ourselves with the communists. It was the worst mistake ever. You should just let them kill each other, and you should have just funded both sides and then let them. It's black on black, dude. We had no business in any of that. Just let it do what they're going to do because they're terrible, bad people. They're going to kill each other. They're going to do what they're going to do, and they will always eat each other. It's always the way it's always been. It's the way it always will be. Now, I'm not saying to sit back and rest on your laurels and just hope that everything works out because that's not what we're supposed to do. But you can't try to affect a change with people who refuse to understand or accept wisdom. You know, in the Bible it says, "Let he who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast." Most people don't reckon anything.
Yeah.
They don't even understand numbers. You know, and of course it's a commonly held belief, like I said, in Catholicism, and I learned this years ago, that Nero Caesar. But these people are patternistic, and they come back and they do it again and again and again. It goes back, like I said, about Lord of the Rings. Tolkien was onto something with Malcor. He was basically like the Antichrist. But then he came back in the form of Sauron. And then it just keeps going. There's always going to be somebody that's going to come in, fill that void. And what these beings are is a race of beings, whereas Lucifer's just one of them. He's one guy. But the Shaitan are an entire race of beings. And like you said, they look at us as talking monkeys.
Yeah. You know, there's one thing with communism and the demonic that there's a common thread there. Both of them do not look at people as individuals. They don't recognize individual rights. Everything's collective. And that's what the demonic how they look at things. They look at things as a collective. They don't believe in the individual. The individual with a free will, an intellect, and
Everything is
free
slavery.
Exactly, and it's mass slavery. Different levels of it, but yeah.
And now, one of the things we had a conversation with, this was very important, and I wanted you to talk about this. You talked about legalities in the spiritual kingdom, in the spirit world. Folks, this guy is really, you have no idea. Let me tell you something. You when you were talking about that, now, we as human beings stupidly give up our rights.
Yeah.
Not only to, you know, the worst elements of the world and say that's our government and we give it to them, but we do it to satanic powers.
Yeah.
And Jesus says we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but the spirit, and we face principalities in high
powers,
places.
principalities, and so forth.
Yeah, and we give them, you know, you don't think that the devils of this world are manipulating the powers that be. Let me tell you something. There's some devil behind all of these, okay? They're not all the same and they're not all friends, but they're all doing what they're doing because they're energy thieves and they're parasites, and they do it on a grand scale. One of the things that happens in this, now you talk about this because you told me about the legality. Explain that to the audience.
The angelic realm, specifically the demonic, they're very legalistic. That means that they recognize what is called the divine economy of authority. When God created them, he infused in them this divine economy of authority. There's an authority structure that they must follow. I'll just give you an example. You know, us as composite human spirit, we are individuals. We have individual rights, and you know the right of owning property is a God-given right. It's an inherent right. If you have a demonic situation in your home, you have spiritual authority over that home, and you can assert your spiritual authority and drive them out. They may not want to, but they have to follow the specific authority structure. There's different types of authority, like, you know, the mother and father has spiritual authority over their children, over their household. You could have, you know, if you own a business, you have spiritual authority over that business, and to a certain extent, your employees. But they have to follow this specific authority structure. And, unfortunately, if people don't understand what this structure is, and if they did, they wouldn't give too many rights to the demonic. when you see demonic operating in an area, they have obtained certain types of rights over that area. I look at them as little lawyers. Okay,
And they do it manipulatively. Too.
exactly. If you have a demonic situation, an infestation type of situation in your home, business, on a piece of property, or even in an object, somehow or another, the demonic has gained spiritual authority over that object. And in order to get rid of them, you have to find out what that spiritual authority came from, and then you have to sever that authority and assert the authority that God gives you over that particular item. And it works every time. It may take a while sometimes, but they have to follow the spiritual authority. It's that was something that it was an eye opener for me. And there's a book that goes into it a great deal. I think Chad Ripperger, Father Ripperger, he wrote a book called Dominion, and it's a rather thick book. It's kind of a hard read, but it goes into the angelic, demonic, their psychology, their abilities, their capabilities, their weaknesses, and this structure of authority that they are bound by. And it's a good book. I don't make any money off of that book. I just read it. I'm still reading it over and over again because it's kind of a hard read. But it tells you everything you need to know about the demonic and their psychology and how they operate and what their capabilities are, their weaknesses, and so forth. So that's a good book, to reference.
Yeah. And see, now, going to what I was saying earlier, there are different levels of these beings, and they come from different regions. Like
Right.
there's some in the desert that they're called the sand dwellers, and that's a lot of people just say that they're the jinn, but really, if you look at it in the Quran, they're all the jinn. If you look at it in the Bible, they're all demons. But that's kind of just a catch-all term saying, hey, these beings that dwell in Ireland, the fairies or whatever, that's like saying that they're the same as the unseelie court is the same as the ones in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
That's like saying Irish people or Syrian people. They're two different things.
Mm-hmm.
One is a Celtic, Gaelic people, and the other is basically a mixture of, I guess, Phoenician and Chaldean and Greek. So even their ancient heritage is completely different. The beings that live below you, really, literally, in the inner earth where these beings are, or around you, the right angle from a right angle, they're the same way. They're as different as Irish people are from Syrian people. But that doesn't mean that they're not, that doesn't mean that you can be friends with them either. And some people are like, well, the ones over here are a lot bad, and these people over here are a lot good. Nah, dude.
Yeah.
Okay. Dick Richards is in the chat. He said something one day that kind of made me chuckle. Somebody was talking about offering something to little people, and he said, that little dude is not your friend. He is not your friend, and he'll slit your throat when he gets a chance because, like you said, Rick, they don't. Now, I had this guy really snarkily in one of the groups, and I'm in 200 Facebook groups, but I have to. I have to hustle stories and do what I got to do. So I asked this guy, I said, tell me about your story. So the guy starts talking about a leprechaun and going, and somebody had said something in there earlier about the leprechaun and it reminded me. And this guy says, that's a bunch of hokey pokey, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, do you believe in the Bible and the Spirit? Yes, I believe in the Bible. Absolutely. I was like, then why do you not believe that? Because Jesus talks about all these different, and then if you take it a step further and you believe everything that's in the King James Version of the Bible, which most Protestants should, then you should look at all these different creatures and beings and all these other things that are going on.
Yeah, it
looks like a book of mythology.
I mean, the fallen, it's more complex than just a battle in heaven where the bad angels, angels rebelled. It's more complex than that. You've got levels of beings. And basically, what happened was, my understanding is that when they fell, it was when the demonic, whether the angelic, certain angels fell. When they fell, there's something called evening and morning knowledge. When they fell at the time of their fall, they had what was called evening knowledge, which is that preternatural knowledge. Mm-hmm. And when they fell, they rebelled against God, and they weren't able to see the beatific vision. They weren't able to see God face to face.
Yeah, they were cut off.
They were cut off. The loyal angels were able to see the beatific vision. And
thus not turned over to a reprobate.
Morning knowledge as opposed to evening knowledge. In other words, they were able to see God face to face in his entirety.
In his glory.
In his glory. And the angel is not in and of itself glorious, but he reflects the light of God.
Like the moon reflects the sun.
Exactly. He reflects God's glory. And they're perfectly happy with that. Believe me.
Yeah, and when it comes to the legality, this is what I told this person. The went down the rabbit hole, and Facebook, of course, is the second best place to have intellectual discussion next to the bar. But this is where I learned I learned everything on 6th Street down here and Facebook. That's where I got everything. It's where all the smart people hang out, right?
You want some intelligent conversation. I'm serious. Some of these street people are very intelligent.
Well, Dr. J, he's the great 76ers.
Yeah.
I think he was he a forward? I might want to look that up, but he said that the greatest ballers he ever played against were ex-cons that couldn't play in the NBA. They were out in the street. He said they'd whoop him every time out there, and he was like one of the best.
Yeah, you want to have a good intellectual conversation? Talk to a bum under the trap.
You're right.
Serious,
because they've seen some stuff.
Yeah.
I've actually done that.
Yeah.
I've actually sat there and
they're smart.
I mean, working security, you definitely do talk to all kinds of people in the toughest situations, and
yeah, they're smart. I mean, they're onto it. They must sleep in a tent under a railroad trestle, but they're a whole lot smarter than me.
Well, one of the things they're smart about is they're not making house payments and car payments and paying taxes. They got that on us. But what you were saying about the legality here, this is what I said to this person a couple months ago on Facebook. I had this argument, and I just remember looking at this, and of course I'm in the restroom. That's where I do all the best thinking too,
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. And my wife's like, stop.
Bad information out, good information in.
Like the Wim Hof, breathe it in, breathe it out. And my wife's like, she's like, you got to stop arguing with these people on Facebook. It's pointless, And I can't help it. I had to say something. And I said, look, dude. He goes, why is not everybody being possessed? If there's demons all around us, why are they not possessing us all the time? And I said, because they have to have legal authority, dude. Yeah. And then I told him, he said, no, well, they're bad guys. What do they care about legality? Mm-hmm. And I told him, I said, even in our society, where we're in the period of the Kali Yuga, where only 25% of people are actually moral, or maybe that means that you are only 25% good. I don't know, but there's different ways to look at it. But I said, dude, even the worst people, they know that there's consequences, so they think twice before they do something.
Yeah.
But then people snap and do crazy things. And not just with guns. I was downtown. There was a couple from Pennsylvania. A guy got stabbed in the chest because the guy said he was trying to kill the Antichrist. Something demonic made him stab that guy.
Yeah.
Guy lived. Luckily, he stabbed him on the wrong side of the heart. And then he was like telling the police, "Okay, I'm good now. Let me go so I can go and kill the Antichrist." And the cops are like, "No, you're going to jail, probably prison, dude. You can find him there."
I've never believed in this bath salts theory.
Yeah, it's demonic.
Eating people's faces off, growling like an animal. I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry.
It sets something in the mind that tunes them into the demonic wavelength.
Yeah.
It's just like megahertz. There's different megahertz that affect the body and the vibrational, your vibrational whatever.
Right.
And I told this person, I said, there's legalities, dude. And they said, well, what does it matter if they're bad guys? Do you agree that the demons are basically outlaws? I said, kinda, yeah. He says, well, when did an outlaw ever obey the law? I said, how many of them, though, really want to face the consequences of that?
Mm-hmm.
You're already going to go to hell, but why make yourself go there earlier than you need to?
Yeah, from what was explained to me, you can take this with a grain of salt, but what was explained to me is God allows these things to happen to people so that they will learn, just like the book of Job.
It wakes people up.
Exactly. And I mean, one sin can cause a possession, but most of the time God restricts it. But he does it for various reasons. We've had saints that were possessed. We've had saints that were beaten, and oppressed by demons. Saint Padre Pio in Italy, he was beaten almost nightly in his room. But he gained holiness by going through that, and in a certain sense, when he was able to conquer that and gain holiness out of it, the demonic was humiliated. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that God does with the demonic. He uses them against us to help us and to help him. Mm-hmm. Because in other words, if if we're afflicted, we can learn from that affliction, become holy, and the demonic, when they lose, they become humiliated. So God uses that as a means of humiliating them.
Yeah, it's funny. There's nothing like the clarity of suffering. So.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a strange. It's hard for a lot of people to understand that, but it's kind of like a simple analogy. If you don't know you wouldn't know what a good day was unless you had a bad day. You wouldn't know what a bad day was unless you had a good day. It's a spiritual enlightenment to be able to battle these things. I've heard most exorcists say that a lot of the people that are possessed are very holy people. It's just the possession occurs in the body, not the soul. And their soul is full of grace, but their body's possessed. Possession occurs in the body, not the soul.
Yeah, because these things want a corporeal body so that they can do the sin that they want.
Exactly.
That they live vicariously through people. That's why they attach themselves to you. The Buddhists believe, too, that only through suffering do you gain transcendence.
Yeah.
There is no transcending unless you suffer.
Right.
And, I had a Buddhist who told me that basically he believed that Jesus was the Maitreya, the greatest of the Buddha. And the last Buddha, they believed he was the last Buddha, the last holy whatever.
Really? That's interesting.
And he was, and he was saying, he was Buddhist by philosophy, Christian by faith. But one of the things that he said, and what he taught me and my brother, he didn't really teach, but he told us, I'm not saying I accepted it, but it's interesting to hear everybody's take on things. I talk to people from around the world, and they tell me all kinds of different beliefs and things, and you take it with a grain of salt or whatever. Grain of bath salt. That joke. Because you said the bath salt, but what he was saying though, it's really deep when you think about it, because he's like, dude, only through humility and suffering did you gain transcendence. That happened to Jesus.
Right.
And Jesus, it's kind of like he had to go through that to gain, because what if Jesus would never have died on the cross, and what happened would have just kind of been like, yeah, there was this guy who taught a bunch of stuff, but the way he died and the way it affected everyone around him, even down to Longinus, who immediately fell to his knees and dropped his spear. And he went back to his captain and he said, look, this man is already dead, but,
It's through the Catholics believe through suffering and mortification, you become spiritually strong.
Mm-hmm.
And through humility, through suffering, you gain a certain degree of humility, which is a spiritual strength.
Mm-hmm.
It's, to have a great deal of power is to not have any power. And, it's kind of a philosophical thing. It's interesting.
I feel like I went through that when I was younger, but you may have to go through it many times in your life. And I remember going from being a somebody, and I've talked about this briefly on my show, maybe not in depth, but to being a nobody.
Yeah.
And then you realize who your real friends are, and then you're like, you're a somebody, and then you go to being an $8 hour security guard.
To be a nobody, you gain insight into your strengths. Mm-hmm. It's nothing wrong with being a nobody.
I connected with God a lot better than
The thing about being a nobody is that you learn to view yourself instead of caring about how other people view you.
You view yourself
honestly. Or you care about how you view yourself more than how.
When you view yourself honestly, you're nobody. Whatever anybody else thinks, you can kiss my.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of strength in that.
Yeah.
It's truth. And I think a lot of other religions or belief systems believe that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And like somebody just says here, I don't know your name, or I'm not going to even say this. These psychos are spraying opium on everything, trying to get to the universe within. The kingdom of heaven is within us. Okay. You're right. The kingdom of heaven is within. That is one of the things that people don't understand. That by going around and looking at everything out in the world, people wander the earth trying to find truth and the peace. Look, we're all born of the life and breath and spark of God. He gives you that, okay? That's why you can create. Everything in this studio was created. Somebody created. This came from an idea, and then somebody enacted it. So to say that only God can create is true, but it's also we can create too, but only through God, because God gives us that grace to do that.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to create your own reality. and then you have to live in it.
Yeah.
And you're responsible for whatever choices you make in that reality. And unfortunately, a lot of people are making some very bad choices right now. And sometimes I may sound a little preachy, I may sound political, I may sound whatever, but the bottom line is I care.
Right.
I give a crap about my listeners, and I care about you, and I want the best for everybody who hears these words come out of my mouth. I may not be 100% right every time. I know that. Go back and do some research, and if I'm wrong, then ring the bell and say, hey, guy, you got it wrong. But sometimes wrong and right, depending on who writes the book. You know, it's subjective. It's you know, and some things are absolutely truth. You know, it's like killing. You know, you can debate sin all day long, but there's some things that are just absolutely wrong, and you're never going to convince me that it's right to hurt a child or to kill someone in cold blood and then go, well, you know, I was possessed. Unfortunately, you know, the court system doesn't really give a crap. Well, the justice system's corrupt anyway, but they don't really look kindly on somebody who uses the defense of a demon. And if you were in a court in, say, old England or, you know, Spain, they would just be like, well, that demon possessed you because you're bad. So if you haven't committed a crime, you're probably going to, or your kid's going to commit a crime, so just go to jail. Nobody cares about your affliction. You know, It didn't work with DeFeo when he killed the people in Amityville. You know, he didn't go, oh, yeah, a demon possessed me, you know, or what's his name, Berkowitz, when he said that the dog told him to do it. Maybe old Shuck did tell him to do it. You know, maybe the cult of Set was involved and they told him to do it. But the bottom line is he did it.
Yeah.
And I could sit here and say, well, I was following orders. That doesn't work. That hasn't worked for a long time for a lot of reasons, because following orders is you're still doing it.
Right.
If somebody came to me, I don't give a crap who I'm working for or what I'm doing. They said, take this gun and kill this person. I'm like, this is an innocent person? Yeah. Okay. I'm just as likely to shoot you and whoever's standing behind you than to shoot this innocent person, because I'm not going to do that.
Right.
Because I'm not going to die basically in blasphemy. Because blasphemy of the Holy Spirit is an unforgivable sin. What it is like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? You die without being able to be forgiven. That's basically blasphemy. So I would have to kill this person. And then, you know, I'm going to die doing the wrong thing, right? So you're going to kill me if I don't do it, either way.
You got a natural law right to defend yourself and your family. I mean, it's not a sin.
That's different.
Yeah, but if to just cold-bloodedly murder somebody, just, you know.
Well, there was a guy talking about that in the Khmer. He was in the Khmer Rouge, Rick.
Right.
You know what that is, right? It's in Cambodia. And he says, well, I was 15 years old and I was forced to kill 200 people. And I said, at what point, as a 15-year-old, I was still very cognizant. I knew the rules of the laws. Yeah. And this guy's not stupid. And I was like, so I'm watching this, and I'm like, how stupid are you? He looked like he wasn't that stupid. Yeah. I said, you're 15 years old, you kill people for 2 years with the Khmer Rouge. By the time you're 17, you got to be knowing, hey, this is wrong. Yeah. And when do you stand up and stop being a coward and saying, you know what, go ahead and kill me because I'm not going to murder these innocent people.
Right.
He watched them kill his mom and dad. He helped and participated in the killing of other people's mom and dads because they wiped out, you know, whole family, and they kept the children and they used them.
Sent them to concentrate or re-education camps.
They wiped out a third of the population. Or no, wait, what was it? 2/3 of the population? I mean, it was really bad. The numbers were really
how many
high.
Millions.
Yeah, it was like over half the population, I believe, was killed.
Wasn't there a movie called The Killing Fields?
The Killing Fields. There's been a lot of movies, books.
Too,
there was a guy on I Shouldn't Be Alive who you know, I was watching it one day, and then this guy, he was doing like an interview on YouTube. I forgot what it was called. And it was my friend Trang is the one that he's a Cambodian guy I used to work out with. And he said, dude, you got to go check this out. You know, check out this video, and it shows you, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit about him because he had a brother-in-law who had a really weird near-death experience, and it involved the moon. And so he told me that story, but he said, go check out this guy's channel. He's now like an evangelist or whatever. And he interviewed this guy from the Khmer Rouge who's now like in his 40s. And the guy's over there like, you know, yeah, I did this, I did that. He's, you know, and I just don't feel it, dude. I'm sorry, dude. You kill people for 2 years, then you escaped, but yet you still kill 200 people. Yeah. You know, by the rules of Buddhism, you have to pay a penance for every single one of those. And it's like what do you call that? And he says he's Buddhist now, right? And I'm like, wow. So you're looking at some heavy karma. You're going to come back a bunch of times and suffer over and over again, according to his belief. But it didn't seem like he was that repentant. You know, you can look at somebody's eyes and they just kind of look like, you know, glazed over, you know, this non-playable character look. They're not sorry.
They say they're sorry.
They say they're sorry, and you can lie your way through life, but you can't. In the end, it doesn't matter. You're going to be called out. You're going to be called to the floor, and I don't feel bad for someone who was forced to kill 200 people. I would have taken the bullet, dude.
Right. You know, that's the way communists view people. They have a misperception of the human being. They view human beings differently than like Christians or somebody else does. You know, the Christian views a human being as, you know, sacred, you know,
Child of God individual.
Child of God individual. Where the communist looks at him as an object.
Yeah.
A means to an end, or an animal.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they don't care about animals. And one of the things I was going to say, now here is the most important thing, and we're going to close it up here. Think about this, guys. And Rick, having you on has been really cool and enlightening. But if you look at, you're talking about MUFON, and you were with MUFON.
Right.
And then the alien question. Have you ever noticed how the aliens are very, like even to the point where some of the abductees that I've talked to have been told by these grays, right, in particular, that they are trying to understand individual and consciousness.
They don't understand individualism.
They don't understand it because somewhere down the line, they accepted a form of collectivization of communism. They literally accepted at some point a hive worker mentality. And now
they have a different spirit.
Yeah, their spirit is not like ours.
No.
And I've even heard it said that our reality was spun off from another reality, and it was done as an experiment to understand the nature of not only reality but consciousness.
Right.
Now you would understand a little more about consciousness and how it goes on infinitely, because that is the soul.
Right.
If you had individualism, but see, they take that away, and then what you're left with is a hive mentality of little.
Yeah.
Gray, whatever.
A lot of people criticize Christians not believing in the possibility of aliens. It's not that we don't believe in the possibility of life elsewhere. It's what kind of life it is and what type of soul do they have. Are we unique in terms of our souls as opposed to whatever life form might be out there? Are we unique in that form? I don't know, but that's something you have to ask yourself.
Rebecca Oliver hit the nail on the head. She's like, the aliens don't have the qualities we do, and they envy it.
Yeah, individualism.
Yep.
That's one of the qualities they just don't understand.
Yeah. Kennington Jim says, be the best piece of utopia that you can every day. And you're right. And then Binky Stall says, I always try to remember I can't see it good. Hive mentality. You're right.
Yeah.
And then Love Cat says they want to know how to create a soul spirit. And Dick says, yep, they're legion. Yep, they are. You know, Monkey Boy, he says all them grays lie through their straight faces too. They do. And then they tell you, like, well, we're just here to observe and we're here to report and do this, blah, blah, blah. Babe, sounds like you're a security guard. You're observing and reporting. Well, why are you in my bedroom? You know, I mean, literally, you know, it's like, there was a joke I saw one time. This guy says, he goes, I don't know why I make people nervous. You know, I was standing in this guy's living room and I'm like, why are you so nervous? And he's like, why are you holding my TV? You know, because you just broke into my house. That's why you're making me nervous, dude. You know, people don't understand. They don't grasp. Like, you know, really being self-aware is one of the first things you can do. And you go down this whole series of emotions and eventually you end up at acceptance. Acceptance is when you figure out that, hey, you have to accept that maybe you were wrong. I've had to do it more times than I can count and backtrack and go, okay, maybe I'm not correct. Let's go down another path. But somewhere in this whole spinning timelines intersecting and everything else, it's all there. But there are some absolutes, you know. And I'm going to tell everybody thank you for listening tonight. Thank you for our guest, Rick.
Thanks for having me
Thanks
on,
for everybody
Josh. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Donated.
I hope we answered any question. If you have a question for Rick, ask it now because we're about to jump off here.
I was going to say thanks to your wife, Bobby. She donated a couple times during the show.
Good.
And like I said, get in touch with me. was it Johnston? What's his name? Bradford.
Bradford Johnson.
And we'll make sure that you get your money because we're donating that to your son. And somebody asked me one day, I said that I tried to give to help people, and somebody made a comment about, they're like, well, how do you know these people really need help? That's on them.
It doesn't matter.
That's not my problem. My problem, if somebody is being false, then that's their karma, not mine.
Yeah.
You give unto those who ask.
Doesn't matter what you believe, your religious beliefs or anything like that, or your stance on life. As long as you love one another, take care of one another, and if every so often sacrifice something for someone else, you'll find a great deal of internal pleasure for that. So, that's the way it is.
Yeah. Yep. Everybody's saying great show, good job. Rebecca says insect aliens. Yeah, there's different types, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it's like I said, there's a difference between a blood and a crypt. What does it matter? When you're working at a property, you have to deal with, it's all just bad, but they're not all the same. Believe me.
What I can do is I can send you a photograph, Josh, of a mantis type creature that we photographed near Smith Mountain Lake, Virginia. Looking from behind a tree. That's an interesting photograph.
Yeah, and then you go down the rabbit hole with all these different types of creatures and entities and whatever else. I have a picture of a minotaur, that was supposedly in the Vatican, below the Vatican.
I wouldn't doubt that.
Yeah, and you got all these weird, but the bottom line is, I believe there's one way to protect yourself. Y'all know what that is. I believe in Christ. Everybody can say whatever you want. This guy talks about aliens and demons, ghosts, and Bigfoot and Dogman, whatever. It's interesting. It's all very interesting, and I try to be thought-provoking on the show. Sometimes it gets a bit preachy. I understand that. And if you want to hate me for being right all the time, go ahead.
Good show, Josh. Good show. But
Rick, you and Bobby are salt of the earth. And guys, if you want to talk to Rick in person, I'm asking him now to be on the panel for the Dogman conference. Rick has gone down the rabbit hole on all these different subjects. One of the things I like about Rick is that he's breaking away from the compartmentalization that's kept us all in chains, because without open discussions between Bigfoot people and UFO people and ghost people, we're not going to get to any. There's no answers.
Yeah. I'm kind of a paranormal nerd.
Yeah, me too.
That's about it. But
yeah. So, folks, for me and Anthony, Tony, and of course our esteemed guest Rick Atain. Esteemed guest. Yes, you're right. You're an esteemed colleague.
Don't tell my wife.
And for Bobby out there, and of course my lovely wife Nellie, and my brother Scorpion, Zane, who are all burning the midnight oil so we could be here. Thank you and good night.